July 1st, 2018, the final day for submitting college application preferences. Owen's family old house. Rachel sat in front of the computer, staring at the T University provisional admission letter beside her, her eyes filled with confusion. Her friend's bewildered voice echoed in her ears. Rachel, are you really going to give up this spot at T University to Naomi just so you can marry your uncle? She's not even your real sister, and she's already taken so much from you. Rachel's soul jolted awake violently. No, I won't allow it. However, I won't go to T University either. I'm going to National Defense University. Her confused gaze gradually grew resolute, and then she opened her computer, filled all her application choices with National Defense University, and clicked submit without hesitation. Seeing the submission successful prompt, at this moment, Rachel finally felt the reality of her rebirth. She was reborn, in her past life. Rachel was the apple of the Lawrence family's eye, a veritable little princess, until the age of 12, when she was kidnapped by enemies, and the Lawrence family's butler, Naomi's father, was pushed into the sea by the criminals while trying to save her. Mr. Mrs. Lawrence brought home their only daughter Naomi, saying she would now be their second daughter. From that moment on, everything changed. Whenever it came to Naomi, Rachel had to yield. At first, it was yielding a doll. Yielding a cup. Later, her parents demanded she yield clothes, her room, even her birthday celebration. In the end, they demanded she give up her guaranteed admission to T University for Naomi, and even had Rachel undergo minor cosmetic surgery to make her resemble Naomi by 80%. Rachel stubbornly refused to agree. Her uncle Neil then said that if she gave it up, he would marry her when she turned 20. In the end, emotion triumphed over reason, to marry Neil. Rachel gave up her chance to attend university. Yet after marriage, Neil was constantly away on business trips, and the number of times they met could be counted on Rachel's fingers. Given another chance, she would never marry her brother-in-law Neil again, nor would she ever give up her chance to go to school. Her friend Yuki was stunned by Rachel's sudden move and took a long time to react, genuinely happy for her. That's great, I'm so glad you've come to your senses. I was sad that we'd have to part, but now it's settled, we're both going south, so we'll still be together. She hugged Rachel, whose eyes were slightly moist, smiled sincerely and said, In the evening, Yuki left. Right after she left, a black Hongqi car drove into the compound. The driver opened the door, and Neil, dressed in a black suit, stepped out of the car. Tall and well-built, his handsome yet aloof features exuded an icy, untouchable aura of restraint. Rachel's grandfather and Neil's father were comrades in arms, so by seniority, Rachel had to address Neil as uncle. In her past life, living day and night with such a man, the young and impressionable Rachel couldn't help but develop feelings, but her greatest mistake was falling in love, lost in thought. Neil's clear gaze turned toward her. What are you standing there for? Rachel paused. Yuki came to see me today and just left. Neil was about to say more when another person stepped out from the red flag car behind him, carrying over a dozen shopping bags of various sizes. Uncle, thank you for buying me so many things. It's Naomi. Rachel looked over and saw her holding LV, Coach, and even a Patek Philippe watch. The pain felt like a knife stabbing through her heart. Ever since Naomi returned to the Lawrence household, Rachel had been enduring everything silently. Until that time she ran a high fever unnoticed and nearly burned away half her life. It was Neil who couldn't stand it any longer and took her to the Owen residence, showering her with affection. But now, even that special favor was gone. Rachel found it unbearable to look at and turned to walk back into the house. The first thing she did upon returning to her room was to retrieve a candy box she had previously stored away in the cabinet. Lifting the lid revealed it filled with colorful origami cranes folded from candy wrappers. She loved sweets. In the past, whenever she cried, Neil would magically produce a candy from his pocket to feed her, coaxing her into happiness. Each time, she couldn't bear to eat them immediately, saving them until they were nearly expired before finally indulging. With each candy she ate, she folded the wrapper into a paper crane. What she treasured most was never those luxury items, but Neil's thoughtful gestures. She believed these paper cranes could prove Neil cared for her, that he liked her, but now it seemed it had all been her wishful thinking. The candy wrapper had long turned yellow. Rachel gently picked up a paper crane, but it crumbled the moment she touched it. The sweet, warm scent from her memories was no longer there. Instead, a faint, lingering bitterness filled the air. Rachel forced a bitter smile. Expired warmth shouldn't be clung to, nor should it be mourned. As she carried the candy box out to throw it away, Neil knocked on her door. He glanced at the candy box in her hand but didn't recognize it as his own gift. Instead, he said, "You're not a child anymore. You're past the age for candy. Cut back on these empty calories." Hearing this, Rachel laughed inexplicably, her chest tight with an indescribable heaviness. Then, right in front of Neil, she tossed the candy box into the trash. "Don't worry, Uncle, it won't happen again." The moment the candy box slipped from her hand, Rachel felt as if she had cast off a shackle from her body, a sense of lightness she had never known before. Neil frowned, sensing something unusual about her today, but in the end, he didn't dwell on it and said calmly, "Get ready. Tonight we're going to Naomi and Lawrence's place for dinner." Upon hearing this, Rachel refused without hesitation. "I'm not going." He knew full well how her parents treated her. He knew full well that returning to that home meant endless verbal abuse, yet Rachel had never possessed the right to refuse. Since they all lived in the same large compound, it was just a short walk away. 10 minutes later, at the Lawrence residence, after the servant brought the last dish to the table, Mr. Lawrence turned to Rachel and said, "Have you thought about giving up your spot at T University to Naomi?" Rachel remained silent. Mr. Lawrence thought she was still unwilling and softened his tone. "Rachel, you need to be sensible and leave the opportunity for your sister." Mrs. Lawrence also chimed in. "Yes, Naomi isn't like you. You have good grades, you can borrow Naomi's identity to take the college entrance exam again next year. It's all the same." Rachel clenched her chopsticks. "Naomi uses my identity, and I use hers. Then will you also announce later that she is your biological daughter, and I'm the adopted one?" As soon as these words were spoken, Mr. Lawrence and Mrs. Lawrence changed their expressions. Mr. Lawrence slammed his chopsticks on the table. "How dare you speak like that?" Naomi immediately stepped forward to hold his arm. "Dad, don't be angry, you have high blood pressure." "Mom, you shouldn't pressure sister anymore either." Mr. Lawrence softened his expression, but still looked displeased at Rachel. "Look at you, do you have half the sense your sister does?" Mrs. Lawrence also gently patted Naomi's head. "Silly child, even without blood ties you're still sisters. It's fine for her to give up the spot for you." Hearing this, Rachel could only feel the irony. She was the biological one. She was the Lawrence family's only real daughter. What nonsense about being sisters without blood ties. Which sister would ever think of taking everything from the other? Rachel lowered her eyes and fell silent again. Mr. Lawrence was about to lose his temper once more. At that moment, Neil glanced at Rachel and spoke calmly. "Rachel has already agreed to give the spot to Naomi. She'll take the college entrance exam again next year. I'll figure something out when the time comes. There's no need for Rachel to undergo minor cosmetic surgery, nor for them to swap identities." Indeed, in her previous life, Rachel had already agreed to Neil's terms. Now that she's been reborn, she's changed her mind, but she doesn't intend to tell anyone. The admission letter from the National Defense University will arrive in half a month. She plans to leave quietly without alerting anyone, yet despite everything, a sharp pain still lingers in her heart, swallowing the bitterness in her throat. Rachel nodded and lied without changing her expression. At these words, the tense atmosphere in the dining room finally eased. Naomi flashed a shrewd glint in her eyes, sweetly smiling. "Thank you, sis." Mrs. Lawrence also, for the first time since Naomi had come to the house, actively served Rachel a shrimp. "This was specially made for you by the chef on Mom's orders. Try it, it's still your favorite flavor, right?" Rachel couldn't suppress the sarcasm at the corner of her lips. "Mom, you misremembered, I'm allergic to seafood. The one who loves shrimp is Naomi." With that, she placed the shrimp into Naomi's bowl. The atmosphere in the room froze again for a moment. Mrs. Lawrence wore an expression of guilt and embarrassment, remaining frozen for several seconds before forcing a dry laugh to save face. "Oh dear, your mother must have remembered wrong. Have something else to eat." She said it with her mouth, but her hands moved the entire plate of shrimp right in front of Naomi. To be honest, after experiencing her past life, Rachel had already grown numb. They didn't care about her, so how could they remember what she liked to eat? She lowered her head to take a bite of rice when suddenly, Neil placed a piece of beef into her bowl. She froze for a moment, then looked up at him. Then he also gave Naomi a piece of beef. Rachel gave a self-deprecating smile. Indeed, what more was she expecting? His favor had long ceased to belong to her alone. She lost her appetite and put down her chopsticks. At that moment, a car horn sounded outside, followed by the guard shouting, "Grandpa Owen is back." Rachel's eyes lit up as she hurried out, just in time to see the spirited elderly man stepping out of the car, holding a bag in his hand. "Grandpa Owen." "Rachel, come quick, I heard you did well on your exams. Grandpa brought you a gift." Rachel felt her eyes grow slightly moist. Just as she was about to step forward, two loud booms sounded, and fireworks blossomed one after another from the corner of the courtyard. The entire night sky brightened under the dazzling display of brilliant sparks. Everyone instinctively turned their gaze toward the night sky. Grandpa Owen nodded approvingly and patted Neil on the shoulder. Well done, you read my mind. You remembered Rachel loves watching fireworks and prepared this gift to celebrate her. Neil glanced at Rachel, but then pulled Naomi forward. Dad, Naomi will be leaving for T University in a month. These fireworks were specially prepared to celebrate Naomi. Grandpa Owen froze slightly, his gaze passing over Naomi before settling on Rachel with concern. Rachel remained smiling in place, though in truth, Grandpa Owen's concern made her nose sting with emotion. Grandpa Owen was the only person in this world who unconditionally supported and treated her well, regardless of right or wrong. Unfortunately, in her past life, she was so consumed by love that she failed his patriotic teachings. The fireworks ended in an eerie silence. Neil was the first to break the stalemate. There's one more thing. Dad, I plan to be with Rachel. Knowing he was about to bring up marriage, Rachel immediately cut him off. Grandpa Owen, you must be tired from the long journey, right? Go back and rest early. I'll come chat with you again tomorrow. Neil frowned and gave her a puzzled look. Grandpa Owen nodded. That's my thoughtful Rachel. I'll head back then. Come find your grandpa tomorrow, Rachel agreed, after Grandpa Owen left. Neil pulled Rachel aside. Why didn't you let me tell him we're getting married? Because we're not getting married. Rachel looked into his dark eyes and answered silently in her heart. After a moment of silence, she finally said, elderly people's blood pressure tends to rise in the evenings. If you suddenly tell him someone who's always called him grandpa is about to become his daughter-in-law, I'm afraid he might faint. Let's take it slow. We'll find another chance to talk about it. Neil pondered for a moment before nodding. All right, but remember to bring it up soon. After all, we still have a wedding to plan. Before the words had fully faded, Naomi's shocked voice suddenly rang out from behind. You're planning a wedding, you're getting married. Rachel had traded marrying Neil in exchange for giving T University's admissions spot to Naomi, a fact that none of the others knew about yet. Seeing both remaining silent, their tacit agreement was evident. Naomi's expression instantly darkened. Dad, Mom, Mr. Lawrence and Mrs. Lawrence hurried over in panic. Naomi, what's wrong? Naomi pointed at Rachel, clutching her chest as if struggling to breathe. Sister is going to marry Uncle. After uttering these words, her eyes rolled back and she fainted. Mr. Lawrence and Mrs. Lawrence stared at Rachel in shock, but before they could say anything, their attention was entirely consumed by the fainted Naomi. Naomi. Even the usually composed Neil immediately stepped forward, scooping Naomi up in his arms, and called to the driver, Old Woo, bring the car over. Soon, the three of them took Naomi and left in the car. Only Rachel was left behind, standing in the dust kicked up by the departing vehicle. When facing Naomi, it seemed she stood no chance of winning. After standing dazed for a long time, she slowly walked back alone to Owen's house against the cold wind. Returning to her room, she absent-mindedly knocked over a box. Hundreds of letters spilled across the floor, each one addressed to Neil. From the moment Neil took her to Owen's house, Rachel gradually fell in love with this uncle who showed her the only kindness in her life. Back then, Neil was genuinely good to her. He remembered all her food preferences, what she liked and disliked. No matter how busy with work, he would drive her to and from school, staying by her side through every late-night study session. Once when she had a high fever, he had an important meeting at work. Upon hearing the news, he dropped everything and rushed back to stay by her side, staying awake the entire night. The moment she woke up and saw him, Rachel felt the pain of being neglected by her parents deeply soothed. But half a year ago, when she confessed her feelings to Neil, he coldly rebuked her. Rachel, I'm your uncle. It seems I've been too good to you, which is why you've developed such thoughts. Later, he didn't return to the Owen household for months, and she became the one nobody cherished or loved again, until she was recommended for admission to T University. Neil suddenly offered to marry her on the condition that she give her spot to Naomi. She should have learned in her past life, things forcibly taken were never truly hers to keep. Rachel lowered her head and slowly picked up love letter after love letter addressed to Neil. With a sharp tear, she shredded them all before tossing the pieces into the trash. She would personally sever all ties with him. Uncle, in this lifetime, I will never again think of marrying you, nor will I pester you anymore. That night, Rachel slept restlessly. Early the next morning, the door was suddenly pounded heavily. The door swung open, and the usually elegant Mrs. Lawrence rushed in with a frantic expression, grabbing Rachel's hand. Rachel, you must cancel your wedding with Neil immediately. Naomi has fallen into depression because of this. If you marry him, you'll be killing her. It hit like a bucket of ice water. Rachel froze on the spot. What do you mean? How is marrying my uncle the same as killing Naomi? Mrs. Lawrence averted her gaze, her eyes flickering with unspoken embarrassment. Naomi, she also has feelings for Neil. She was already depressed from losing her father, and now with news of your marriage, her condition has worsened. Even if it's your mother begging you, don't go through with this wedding. Let Neil spend time with Naomi. Alright, Rachel felt utterly absurd. The accumulated grievances of years of neglect reaching their breaking point. Uncle isn't a psychologist, why should he be the one to comfort Naomi during her episodes? Ever since Naomi came into our family, I've been making concessions. Everything I have, if she wanted it, you all demanded I sacrifice it. Was giving up the T University spot not enough? Now I must surrender my husband too, Mrs. Lawrence averted her eyes guiltily, yet insisted, Naomi's condition is truly severe, she's been self-harming. Mom promises you, once her health improves and she goes to T University, we'll have Neil come back to marry you. Alright, Rachel felt as if another knife had been plunged into her heart. Though she no longer intended to marry Neil, at this moment, she simply couldn't bring herself to tell her mother. Before she could recover, another person burst through the door. It was her father. The towering man began scolding the moment he spoke. Rachel, can't you be more generous? We're family, are you really trying to push Naomi to her death? Don't forget, you owe Naomi a life. Oh, always owe. Rachel stared fixedly at the two blood relatives forcing her hand. Her fingertips digging painfully into her palms as she spoke each word with deliberate emphasis. Haven't I spent all these years repaying my debt to Uncle's life? What more must I do to settle it? Must I die to be free of it? Before the words had fully faded, Neil suddenly entered through the door. He stepped forward and gripped Rachel's shoulders. Calm down. No one said the marriage is off, just postponed. Naomi is seriously ill this time. You're her sister, how can you just watch her suffer? Even though she had already decided to let go of Neil, to leave in half a month, at this moment, Rachel still couldn't help but clench her fists tightly. She had been abandoned again, by everyone, including Neil, who had once been her only shelter. A pang of heartache left her struggling to breathe. After a long moment, Rachel finally released her grip and murmured desolately, Fine, I agree to postpone. You can't have your cake and eat it too. Just as well, she had no intention of giving up her spot at T University, nor did she plan to marry Neil. Naomi wants Neil, then take him. The three of them hastily departed upon hearing her reply. Rachel watched their retreating figures for a long moment before walking to the mirror. Picking up a pair of scissors, she personally cut off the waist-length hair she had grown for years. Then she went to find Grandpa Owen to take her for training. The National Defense University required not only knowledge but also a robust physique. Training also allowed her to temporarily forget the sadness brought by her parents and Neil. 3 days later, Rachel was running around the courtyard with sandbags tied to her legs when Neil suddenly returned. He glanced at her and walked over in surprise. Why did you cut your hair? Rachel stopped, casually wiping the sweat from her forehead as she evaded. It's hot this way, it's cooler. That makes sense. But Neil still inexplicably felt something was off. He couldn't shake the feeling that Rachel had changed a lot lately. She wasn't clinging to him as before, and when he mentioned postponing the wedding, she didn't even make a fuss. He frowned, ultimately deciding he was overthinking it. You haven't visited Naomi all these days, don't you care about her at all? Hearing this, Rachel couldn't help but slightly curl her lips. Haven't you and my parents been keeping her company these days? Do you still need me? Neil furrowed his brows even tighter. Just as he was about to say something more, his gaze fell upon a booklet placed on the stone table nearby. National Defense University Journal reading, National Defense University. Why are you reading about this school? Nothing, just browsing. Rachel lied casually. Even when Neil took the book from her hands and stared at her with a scrutinizing gaze, her expression remained unchanged. Since when have you been interested in National Defense University? You've never been able to handle pain since childhood. Do you actually want to be a soldier? Even if you retake the college entrance exam next year, this university isn't suitable for you. With that, he placed the booklet back on the table. His phone rang, after listening to the voice on the other end. He turned to leave. I need to get back to the hospital. When you have time, remember to visit Naomi. Watching Neil's retreating figure, Rachel forced a bitter smile. After a long pause, she untied the sandbag, said goodbye to Grandpa Owen, and headed to the hospital. Didn't they want her to go see? Well then, she would go see. Half an hour later, at the hospital. Soon, Rachel found Naomi's hospital room, through the glass window. Rachel saw her biological mother lovingly peeling an apple for Naomi. Meanwhile, Neil was accompanying Naomi reading a book, The Plum in the Golden Vase. So Neil reads this kind of book too. Naomi was still pretending not to understand. Uncle, what does this mean? Rachel suppressed her discomfort and pushed the door open to enter. Upon seeing her, Naomi immediately changed her expression, hugged Neil with teary eyes, and pleaded, Sister, won't you give Uncle to me? I didn't confess my feelings before because of calling you uncle, but if even you can marry him, then why can't I?" Rachel remained silent, her gaze quietly sweeping across the faces of the people in the hospital room. No one stopped Naomi. She already stole the spot at T University, and now she's trying to steal a man too, yet no one thought she was wrong. Rachel twitched the corner of her mouth. "Marrying uncle was what I got in exchange for the T University spot. If you want to marry him, then give the T University spot back to me. You can't have your cake and eat it too, right?" Naomi turned pale, tears immediately falling. "Mrs. Lawrence immediately stood up to defend her. "Rachel, how could you speak to your sister like that? Besides, the spot's already been given to Naomi. Even if it were returned to you, you couldn't change anything now." Neil comfortingly patted Naomi on the shoulder before standing up and pulling Rachel out of the hospital room. "I asked you to come see Naomi, not to aggravate her illness." Rachel suddenly found herself recalling the day of her death in her previous life. Back then, she was already gravely ill, yet she still dragged her sick body to cook a whole table of Neil's favorite dishes because that day was Neil's birthday. Back then, when she first arrived at the Owen household, she was sensitive and uneasy. The other children in the compound mocked her, saying she was abandoned by her parents, a pitiful creature unloved by anyone. She hid and cried, until Neil comforted her, begging her to organize his birthday party for him. He told her he needed her, that she was useful, and most certainly not unloved. Every year on his birthday after that, she would wait and hope, preparing different surprises for him, until the day she died. Rachel took a deep breath. "Uncle, do you remember why you brought me to the Owen family? Do you remember what you said that day?" Neil froze. Before she could finish speaking, a loud bang erupted from the hospital room. Rachel turned her head and saw Naomi smashing her head against the wall like a madwoman. Bang, bang. Naomi slammed her head against the wall twice in succession, the violent impacts sending blood streaming down her face. Through the door, she wept with heart-wrenching agony. "Sister, please give him to me. Won't you let me have your brother-in-law?" "Naomi, don't be like this. It breaks my heart to see you this way." "Naomi, calm down. We'll give you whatever you want. Just stop." "Doctor." In the hospital room, Mr. Lawrence. Mrs. Lawrence finally stopped pretending to be dead, anxiously crowding around Naomi. Rachel watched, her numb heart being brutally wounded once more. Meanwhile, Neil unhesitatingly released her hand, tossing back only these words: "No matter what, I won't go back on my promise to marry you. Just stop provoking Naomi." Then he rushed through the door. In this battle, Rachel had lost completely yet again. But fortunately, she no longer cared. Her life would triumph elsewhere. Rachel silently turned and left. Returning home, she took advantage of Neil's absence to gradually pack up clothes, books, and other necessities for university. In just 3 days, the once crowded bedroom stood empty. All these years, Neil, the things he gave her were placed in another box, everything related to Neil. She had no intention of taking with her. They would remain in this room, leaving it up to Neil to decide what to do with them later. 3 more days passed, with only 4 days left until departure. Morning. Rachel had just woken up when she received a call from her school teacher. "Your college admission letter has arrived. Come pick it up." Just when she didn't feel like going out, Neil returned. Seeing her walking out with a backpack, he couldn't help but call out to her, "Where are you going?" "Let me drive you." Neil hadn't offered to take her anywhere in a long time. Rachel clutched her bag strapped tightly, afraid he'd discover she was going to retrieve her National Defense University admission letter. "No need, uncle, I'm just heading to school." Neil left no room for refusal. "It's on my way. Come on, get in the car." Rachel had no choice but to get in. During the ride, Neil broke the silence first. "What are you going to school for, while we're at it? When will Naomi's admission letter arrive? Can't you wait any longer?" Rachel twisted her lips. "It was decided the moment I arrived. Things set in stone won't change." Neil gave her a strange look, sensing there was more to her words. But Rachel stopped the driver. "Just drop me off here. The road ahead isn't convenient. I'll walk the rest myself." With that, without waiting for Neil to respond, she hurriedly got out of the car. The red flag sedan sped away, leaving the heat waves on the road trembling in its wake. She withdrew her gaze and walked under the blazing sun to the school, where she solemnly received the admission letter from the teacher. At last, she would finally be able to leave. Walking home, she felt cheerful the whole way, as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Returning to the courtyard house, she saw Mrs. Lawrence waiting at the door of Owen's house. Rachel stopped. She wasn't foolish enough to think her mother was there out of concern. "Mom, what's the matter?" Mrs. Lawrence spoke awkwardly. "You've seen it yourself. Naomi truly likes Neil. Just let her have him." As expected, Rachel was unsurprising. She let out a mocking laugh. "Mom, Do you remember that before I turned 15, I was your most beloved daughter, Mrs. Lawrence remained silent. Rachel suddenly felt it was utterly pointless. No matter how much she said, it would make no difference. Better not say more. Don't worry, I'll do as you wish. Everything Naomi wants from me will soon be hers. Mrs. Lawrence froze momentarily. What do you mean by that? Nothing. Rachel clutched her bag tightly and fled back to her room. Through the glass window, she watched her mother's retreating figure, ultimately unable to stop herself from whispering through tear-reddened eyes, "If I had a choice, I wouldn't want to be Rachel at all." 2 more days, and Rachel would be leaving. No matter what, she still wanted to have a proper farewell with Neil. She went to the hospital and stopped Neil when he came out to fetch water for Naomi. "Uncle, tomorrow is your birthday. Will you come back to have dinner with me?" Just like before, only the 2 of us. However, Neil hadn't even answered when they heard Naomi speak from the hospital room. "Mom, will my sister come to Uncle's and my wedding?" Rachel paused for a moment, laughing at herself inwardly. There was actually no need to yield voluntarily. Whenever Naomi wanted something, her parents would give it to her. "Congratulations, Uncle." Her calmness suddenly filled Neil with an intense unease. He opened his mouth, about to speak. Just then, Naomi hurried out from the hospital bed, shielding Neil as she pleaded pitifully. "Sister, it's my fault. Don't blame Uncle. I just wanted to experience what it feels like to be married. Can you come to our wedding? Consider it my birthday gift. Don't worry, once I've tasted the sweetness of marriage, I'll stop pestering Uncle forever. I'll give you both my blessings." Rachel didn't speak, just looked at her quietly, meeting her cool gaze. Neil frowned more deeply. "It's just a marriage in name only. Like children playing house. Can a wedding be in name only? This is simply an absurd farce. But at least she's leaving the morning after tomorrow, so she won't have to join in their foolishness." Rachel nodded and casually lied. "All right, I'll attend." Neil let out a relieved sigh. "I'm glad you understand. As for tomorrow night, I'll be back," Rachel acknowledged with a sound before turning to leave. Perhaps because she was about to report to the National Defense University, Rachel slept soundly that night. Countdown, 1 day remaining. At 7 a.m., Rachel woke up according to her usual biological clock. She carefully placed the notice into her bundle, then sat at the desk, pulled out a sheet of letter paper, and began writing her farewell. After hiding everything away, she asked the housekeeper to buy some groceries. At 6 p.m., Rachel prepared several dishes Neil liked and waited by the table. At 7 p.m., Neil returned. Rachel reheated the dishes. "Uncle, have a seat." Neil frowned. "Since we're getting married, let's drop the uncle from now on." Neil, in her past life after marrying Neil, she had indeed called him that, but only a few times before Neil never returned to the Owen family home again. Rachel fell silent for a moment, lowering her head to avert her gaze. "Let's wait until after we're married. It would feel unnatural for me to change how I address you so suddenly." Neil nodded and added, "I've thought it over. The house is still too far from T University. I'll buy an apartment near your school when you retake the T University entrance exams next year. It'll be more convenient for your commute and give you private space." Rachel slowly swallowed her rice. "For me, or for Naomi?" Mid-sentence, a firework suddenly bloomed in the pitch-black, silent night sky outside. Boom, boom, boom. Neil didn't hear her words, turning to look outside as pink fireworks instantly filled the night sky, leaving him momentarily stunned. Who prepared this? Rachel walked outside and waited until the fireworks ended before speaking softly. "I did." Neil felt she'd been acting strange all day, though perhaps it hadn't just started today. Why set off fireworks all of a sudden? On her 18th birthday, Neil gave Rachel a fireworks display that stunned the entire city. At that time, she thought she was the exception, the only one, the most special existence. But more than 10 days ago, Neil prepared an even grander fireworks display for Naomi, so she decided to return this fireworks display to Neil. Rachel turned to look at Neil, smiling faintly. "To celebrate today, and, last time, the fireworks you set off were for Naomi. I want to see one that belongs to me." This was the last fireworks show she watched in City J, and also the last one she watched with him. Rachel sat back at the table. "All right, let's eat. The food will get cold soon." Neil felt more and more that something was off, but when it came to specifics, he couldn't quite put his finger on it. He wanted to say something more, but just then, his secretary hurried in and whispered in his ear, "Mr. Neil, the hospital called. They said Miss Naomi's condition is very unstable and they need you to come immediately." Neil paled slightly and stood up to leave. Rachel glanced at the barely touched meal and instinctively called out, "Uncle, at least finish your food first. The doctors will take care of her. After all, this would be our last meal together." Neil paused, an inner voice screaming relentlessly, "Stay, don't go, otherwise It feels like something will inevitably be lost, the secretary added. I heard Miss Naomi was in so much pain she was rolling on the ground. Neil hesitated no longer, tossing out the words, "You eat first, I'll come back to eat later," and strode away. In the vast night, Neil's figure stood tall and imposing. Once, Rachel thought that would be her eternal safe harbor. Only after rebirth did she realize that she alone could be her own harbor. She watched him leave until he disappeared from sight. Sighed, and lost her appetite despite the table full of dishes. She returned to her room and took out the luggage she had already packed. In the end, it still turned out like this. They couldn't even finish a proper farewell meal. Oh well, perhaps this is just fate. Rachel took a deep breath, walked into the courtyard, and lit 2 sparklers. It was given as a free gift when buying fireworks. She stuck the sparkler into a crevice between stones, then closed her eyes and clasped her hands together. I wish for Neil to be safe and healthy, happy and carefree, free from illness and misfortune. As for myself, I vow to devote my life to the nation, to serve my country, and for our motherland to prosper, and may we never meet again. As she finished speaking, the sparkler burned out. Grandpa Owen happened to return just then. Rachel, setting off fireworks. Why are you alone? Where's Neil? Rachel smiled faintly. Naomi is sick. Uncle went to the hospital to see her, mentioning Naomi. Grandpa Owen frowned. Rachel, don't blame yourself for what happened back then. You were the victim. No one wanted that to happen. As for your so-called parents, I think they've gone a bit mad. Let me have a proper talk with them. Rachel shook her head. No need, Grandpa Owen, because I'm about to leave. I got accepted into the National Defense University. My flight leaves at 8 tomorrow morning. Grandpa Owen looked surprised. Didn't you dream of going to T University? That spot at T University. Perhaps only Grandpa Owen still remembered her dream. Everyone else didn't care and just wanted her to give it up. Rachel smiled. I fooled everyone. I didn't give up the spot. Nor did I tell anyone I was leaving. I only told you, I might not be able to visit you often in the future. Please take care of yourself. Grandpa Owen sighed deeply and patted her shoulder meaningfully. Good child, go, pursue your dreams, contributing to the nation's strength, no matter where you are. I'll always be proud of you. Rachel nodded solemnly. She returned to her room, picked up her luggage, and prepared to leave. Before leaving, she took one last look at the room where she had lived for 2 lifetimes, her gaze finally settling on a photograph pressed beneath the glass of the desk. The photo showed her at 17 and Neil at 22. It was also the only photo they had taken together. Since I'm leaving anyway, there's no point keeping this photo to cause resentment. She pulled out the group photo, tore it cleanly in half, and left only Neil's portion on the desk, right beside the farewell letter. Then, she turned and walked away. She kept walking into the distance, never looking back. Meanwhile, Neil hurried to the hospital. The hospital room was in complete chaos. Naomi writhing in pain on the floor, with doctors and nurses unable to approach. Meanwhile, Mr. Lawrence and Mrs. Lawrence were heartbroken but utterly helpless. When they saw Neil arrive, it was like grasping at a lifeline. Neil, hurry and think of a way to calm her down. But before Neil could do anything, Naomi saw him and threw herself into his arms. Uncle, don't leave me, don't leave me. Why couldn't I see you the moment I opened my eyes? Neil could only gently reassure her. All right, I won't leave. Please don't do anything foolish. Naomi gradually calmed down. The doctor stepped forward to examine her, his brows furrowing repeatedly before finally saying, just get some rest and you'll be fine. Then he turned and walked out. Neil found it strange and waited until Naomi fell asleep before going to see that doctor. After questioning for a long time, the doctor finally said, Mr. Neil, to be honest, this girl's condition doesn't resemble depression. It seems more like, she's faking it. Neil was stunned. Faking it, the doctor nodded. But she's making such a scene that I can't be certain. Neil had planted a seed of doubt in his heart. Recalling this period, it seemed that whenever he was around, Naomi never had an episode. Yet shortly after he left, she would invariably feel unwell. Could it be? There's really something fishy going on, but who would feign illness to harm themselves? Neil was deeply troubled. In fact, ever since leaving the courtyard house, he had felt uneasy. Rachel's final glance had left him flustered. He turned to leave the hospital, only to be stopped by Mrs. Lawrence. Neil, you can't go now. If you leave, Naomi will throw another tantrum when she wakes up and doesn't see you. Neil frowned deeply. But I've already taken many days off from the district and can't keep accompanying Naomi. Mrs. Lawrence hesitated. How about, you take Naomi back to your place first. After the sham wedding is over and she's satisfied, we'll take her back. Neil frowned even more deeply. But remembering how Naomi looked during her episodes, he remained silent for a long time before saying, let me go back and ask Rachel first. After all, Naomi had hurt her. And forcing them to live under the same roof would be unfair to Rachel. I'm heading back first. Neil quickly left the hospital, returning to Owen's house. The moment he saw the lights off inside, Neil felt a surge of unease rise from his feet straight to his heart. A deliberately ignored string suddenly snapped. He quickly went upstairs and pushed open the door. Rachel's bedroom was already empty. On the desk lay only a torn photograph and a farewell letter. The letter bore just 2 lines. Grandpa Owen, I got accepted into the National Defense University. I'm going to serve our country now. Neil, goodbye. Neil's inner unease reached its peak at this moment. He looked down at the torn photograph on the table, and a thought suddenly flashed through his mind. Rachel doesn't want him anymore. Her words about no longer clinging weren't a tactical retreat, nor an affected pose. She truly meant to sever all ties, leaving him completely behind. Grandpa Owen approached from behind him, his aged eyes also dimming with sorrow. Rachel is gone. She's not coming back. Neil stiffened all over. Why? Grandpa Owen glanced at him. Why? Do you remember why you brought Rachel back in the first place? Neil remembered. It was because Naomi's arrival had subjected her to endless neglect and cold treatment. He couldn't stand how the Lawrence couple treated their own daughter, so he took her back to be good to Rachel. Grandpa Owen continued. Think again about how you've treated Rachel during this time. Those Neil had never noticed now surfaced in his mind. At some point, every glance Rachel gave him had felt like a farewell. Suddenly, regret washed over him. If only he had stayed, would everything have been different? Neil swayed slightly but steadied himself against the desk as he took the torn photograph. That was 22-year-old Neil. Beside him stood Rachel's Neil, not him, the Neil who'd been torn away and left behind. Neil suddenly felt an intense pang of heartache. I have my reasons. Rachel called him uncle. How could she possibly like him? If people in the compound found out, what kind of gossip would they spread about her? He avoided her, wanting her to calm down a bit. After all, she was about to take the college entrance exams. He thought he would make things clear with her after the college entrance exams were over. But when the exams ended, he still didn't know what to say, so he kept putting it off. Until that day, Mr. Lawrence and Mrs. Lawrence came to him, saying Rachel had been recommended for admission to T University and hoping he could persuade Rachel to give this spot to Naomi. Neil refused immediately. That's impossible. T University is Rachel's dream. Not just her. I wouldn't agree either. Mr. Lawrence and Mrs. Lawrence said, as long as Rachel gives up this spot, our debt to Naomi will be settled. Once Naomi goes to T University, we won't interfere with her anymore. Neil paused. Then will you treat Rachel well in the future? Mr. Lawrence and Mrs. Lawrence exchanged a glance. Of course. Rachel is our biological daughter. How could we not treat her well? Neil knew that the deepest scar in Rachel's heart was her parents' neglect. If we could just send Naomi away, wouldn't everything go back to normal? He took the initiative to approach Rachel, hoping she would give up her spot for Naomi. Unsurprisingly, Rachel refused. How could you even ask me to do this? You know very well, Naomi has already taken so many opportunities from me, other things I couldn't choose, but this chance to study was something I fought for myself. I won't give it up. Neil didn't understand what was happening. He had meant to tell her that if she gave it up, Mr. Lawrence and Mrs. Lawrence would treat her better. The words that came out were, if you step aside, I'll marry you. Don't you like me? The moment he said it, he regretted it. Then he saw Rachel's face fill with disbelief and hurt. When Neil tried to take it back, Rachel said, fine, I'll step aside. Then he thought, after Naomi left, Rachel would understand. Besides, she could still take the college entrance exam next year and continue her education. Thinking this way, he didn't explain further. Everything that happened later was because of this reason. He bought things for Naomi, hoping that after going to T University, he could reduce contact with Mr. Lawrence and Mrs. Lawrence. Yet in the end, how did it come to this? Rachel left, or rather gave up T University, and went to the National Defense University. Since she didn't want to, why didn't she tell me? Neil sat down on the chair in a daze. Grandpa Owen sighed and turned to leave. After who knows how long, Mrs. Lawrence came knocking at the door. Neil only then realized he had been sitting in this room for a full day and night. Neil, go check on Naomi quickly. She hasn't seen you for days and is going crazy now. Neil blinked his lifeless eyes slowly. If she's having an episode, go find a doctor. I'm no doctor. I can't cure illnesses. Mrs. Lawrence looked stunned. What are you saying? Neil slowly stood up. No matter what happens to Naomi, I won't interfere anymore. Rachel left. She's gone to school. The spot at T University can't be transferred anymore, and I won't indulge your nonsense any longer. Hearing this, Mrs. Lawrence jolted violently. What did you say? Rachel went to school. The admission letter from T University isn't supposed to arrive for another half a month. Neil smiled strangely. She didn't go to T University. Because of all of us, she personally gave up on her dreams. Neil had never regretted anything so much before. He stepped past Mrs. Lawrence and walked out, but before he could take 2 steps, Mrs. Lawrence caught up and grabbed him. Where has Rachel gone? She promised to give the T University spot to Naomi. How could she go back on her word? I'm going to bring her back. Tell me where she is. Neil frowned deeply. You don't care at all about Rachel's safety. Where she went alone, whether she might be in danger, you don't care. Your first thought was actually about that spot. You don't really care about Rachel at all. It's all for Naomi, isn't it? Mrs. Lawrence was stunned and took a long time to respond. Of course I care. Neil wouldn't believe another word of it. How could he be so foolish to actually believe that couple's words and hurt Rachel? Mrs. Lawrence still wouldn't give up. Even without this opportunity, you should go see Naomi. Her illness is so severe. Neil cut her off. Naomi's illness is completely fake. He finally understood everything Naomi did was just to take what belonged to Rachel. Mrs. Lawrence didn't believe it. How could this be possible? Neil took Mrs. Lawrence to the hospital. Since there was no prior notice, Naomi was quiet when they arrived at the ward. Standing outside the ward, Neil noticed Naomi was writing a diary. He pushed the door open and walked in. Naomi immediately flustered and hid her diary, then wore an expression of long-endured pain. Uncle, why did you take so long? Do you not want me anymore? Neil frowned slightly. He had originally come to expose her, but now, he felt that diary contained far more than he'd thought. He paused. Something came up. The doctor said your condition is quite serious and wants to take you for further tests. Naomi froze. A flicker of panic flashing through her eyes. Neil didn't miss it and immediately moved to fetch a doctor. Naomi grabbed his arm urgently. No, I don't want a doctor. I'm scared of them. Neil yanked the diary from beneath her pillow and flipped it open. At this moment, Naomi changed her expression. No, give it back to me. Neil dodged her and read out the first sentence. February 29th, not long after the spring festival, I've made a bold decision to kill my own father. I added sleeping pills to the calming pills Dad usually takes. If an accident happens, no one will be able to tell. Without a doubt, my father will die, and without a doubt, I will be adopted by another family. I hope it's the Owen family, wealthy and powerful, the best choice. Mr. Lawrence and Mrs. Lawrence stood frozen at the hospital room door. Naomi's face instantly turned deathly pale. Neil's expression darkened as he continued reading. March 18th. I never expected my father would die saving Rachel. The Lawrence family wants to adopt me. The Lawrence family has good conditions and maintains close ties with the Owen family, so I can accept it. First, I need to eliminate Rachel. With her around, love gets divided, and I refuse to share. Neil finished reading the contents, and Mrs. Lawrence immediately slapped Naomi across the face. Mrs. Lawrence broke down instantly. Naomi, how could you be such a wicked child? You actually killed your own father. Neil quickly flipped through the remaining pages. And that's not all. She also framed Rachel in various ways, like deliberately making herself allergic and blaming it on Rachel, or pretending to be sick to force Rachel to give up her room. Mrs. Lawrence then grabbed Naomi by the hair and slapped her several more times. How could you betray the kindness our Lawrence family has shown you? How could you betray Naomi's father? Naomi's face was swollen from the slap. She spat a mouthful of bloody saliva at Mrs. Lawrence and laughed hysterically. I just wanted a better life. What's wrong with that? In the end, it's you who didn't trust your own daughter. Just one step away, just one more step and I would have gotten both the T University spot and Neil. Mr. Lawrence and Mrs. Lawrence were filled with rage, while Neil stared at her coldly. Starting today, no one will care whether you live or die. A few days later, City J, nighttime, after finishing a day's work. Neil sat in his office with an icy aura that kept others at bay. He picked up the phone and uttered a low hello. The response came immediately. Mr. Neil, we've located Miss Rachel. She did enroll at the National Defense University, majoring in weapon systems and ammunition engineering. All right, I understand. Hanging up the phone, Neil clenched his fist. Rachel, I've finally found you. National Defense University. The morning sunlight bathed the solemn teaching buildings, filling the campus with an atmosphere that was both serious and vibrant. Today is new student registration day, and vibrant banners hang throughout the campus. At the center of the Welcome Plaza stands the new student registration desk. Rachel dragged her luggage through a sea of military green figures before finally spotting the banner for the Weapon Systems and Ammunition Engineering program. Her heart leapt with joy as she quickened her pace toward it. The senior students in charge of reception stood tall and straight, shining brightly in the sunlight. Rachel took a deep breath and walked up to the senior student at the reception. introducing herself. "Hello, senior. I'm a freshman in weapon systems and ammunition engineering, Rachel." Upon seeing Rachel, the senior student's eyes lit up, and she smiled warmly as she grasped both of Rachel's hands. "Welcome to National Defense University. I'm your senior, a junior. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions in the future." Her tone was warm yet dignified, instantly making one feel at ease. Registration, check-in, dormitory arrangements. By the time all these were done, it was already afternoon. There are 4 people in the dormitory in total, besides Rachel and another girl. 2 freshmen haven't arrived yet. The girl on the opposite bunk had 2 braids and a doll-like face, appearing extremely introverted and uncomfortable. Several times, she fidgeted nervously as if wanting to leave the dorm, but each time she reached the door, she turned back dejectedly. After pacing back and forth a few times, she finally lowered her head and slumped onto the desk. After tidying up her things, Rachel sat on the chair and took out a box of white rabbit milk candies from her bag. She had bought this on the way specifically for this. Once, when arriving in an unfamiliar environment, she needed others to help her adjust. Now, she could not only face it alone but also help others. Rachel flashed a smile and took out 2 candies, spreading them open before the girl in the opposite bed. "Hello, classmate. My name is Rachel. I'm Susan." The girl was visibly startled, stammering as she spoke, seeing the candy before her. A blush quickly spread across her simple, round doll-like face. She waved her hands as if wanting to refuse, but in her nervousness, couldn't even get the words of refusal out. Rachel gently held her hand and placed 2 candies in her palm. "Susan, I want to go buy some things. Could you come with me? I just arrived here and feel a bit uneasy going alone." "Oh, of course I can." Susan sprang to her feet, then seemed to think herself too hasty as she took a small step back. "Let's go then." Rachel wore a faint smile throughout as she took Susan's hand, who didn't pull away. The 2 inquired around while searching for the friendship store. After many day tours, they gradually became more familiar with each other. "Rachel, your hair is so short now. I can't bear to cut mine." Her voice was soft, but she no longer avoided Rachel's gaze. Rachel responded by casually ruffling her own hair a couple times, the fine strands immediately falling back into place. With a laugh, she said, "Summer's too hot. I just chopped it off on a whim." Susan showed a hint of envy in her eyes. She lowered her gaze and said despondently, My mother says that since our bodies, hair, and skin are gifts from our parents, she won't let me cut it." Hearing this, Rachel frowned. As far as she knew, the school had grooming regulations. Female students were generally required to keep their hair at ear length, though they could tie it into a ponytail, provided it didn't interfere with wearing a helmet. With Susan's thick, long braid like that, "I'm afraid it won't do." She was about to speak when she heard Susan say again, "I'm useless too. I've already sneaked out to go to school, yet I'm still afraid of my mother's words and don't dare to cut my hair." "You sneaked out too?" Susan came to her senses and widened her eyes in disbelief. "You too?" Her voice involuntarily rose before she quickly lowered it again. "You also have a stepfather who wants to sell you. They won't come after you again, will they?" Hearing Susan's words, Rachel's heart skipped a beat, and she unconsciously tightened her grip on her hand. She shook her head with a smile and spoke in a comforting tone. No one can come to take us away. Look at the sentry post at the gate, they can't get in." Hearing this, Susan let out a long sigh of relief. "That's good. If we were really caught and taken back, Mr. Stevens' teachings would have been wasted on me." "Who is Mr. Cowshed?" Rachel asked curiously. At the mention of Mr. Cowshed, Susan became animated, as if a floodgate had opened, speaking with uncontainable enthusiasm. "Mr. Cowshed is the gentleman who lives in the cowshed. He's refined and wears glasses. There's so much he knows: astronomy, geography, math, English. They say he even studied abroad when he was young. I met him when I was herding cattle as a child. He said that in ancient times there was the scholar, and now there was the ox-shed gentleman. He said we were fated, and he taught me to read, write, and do arithmetic, both our own and foreign things. He taught me everything." As she spoke these words, her eyes sparkled, as if lost in some beautiful memory, but soon, a trace of sorrow crept into her voice. "Later, the gentleman passed away. He always said he wanted to return home, but he died before he could make it back." Her sorrow didn't linger long, soon giving way to renewed cheerfulness. "I just read the books he left behind, hidden in the stone trough behind the cowshed. The more I read, the more I wanted to see what lay beyond the mountains. The teacher once said that a person's most precious possession is life, and it's given to us only once. One's life should be spent in such a way that when looking back, there are no regrets over wasted years spent in idleness, nor shame for a petty existence lived without dignity. I've thought long and hard. When registering my household, the teacher helped me change my name to Susan. like the green of fresh grass. I want to be like weeds that no fire can burn out. Springing back to life with the breeze. I can't be sold off to a manned marriage, childbirth, none of that will do. I refuse to spend my life confined to those 3 feet around the stove, being someone's wife or someone's mother. I love reading about planes and cannons in books, I want to study them. The teacher said if he can't make it home, I should run beyond these mountains and see it for him. Rachel, I ran away. Rachel never expected that the usually introverted Susan could say so much at once. Her face was flushed, her chest heaving, but her eyes shone brilliantly. She took Rachel's hand and said gratefully, "Thank you, Rachel. Besides Mr. Cowshed, no one has ever been willing to listen to me talk this much." After this incident, Rachel and Susan became thoroughly acquainted, when the two returned to the dormitory hand in hand, carrying a thermos. They happened to meet a girl on the stairs who was struggling with 2 heavy suitcases, panting heavily. She had a standard bob haircut, wore glasses, and looked refined and scholarly. Rachel immediately wanted to step forward and help upon seeing this, but was Susan stopped. "I'll do it." She handed the thermos to Rachel and strode toward the girl, under the astonished gazes of both. She effortlessly hoisted 1 suitcase in each hand onto her shoulders. The previously stone-like heavy burden now felt like 2 lumps of cotton, lightly pressing on Susan's frail and slender shoulders. She even had enough strength to turn back and speak to the girl whose glasses had slipped to the tip of her nose. "Let's go. Classmate, which floor do you live on?" Seventh floor, Rachel. "We both live on the 7th floor." With that, she hoisted the box and bounded up the stairs with thunderous footsteps, swift as the wind. Rachel never expected that the timid, baby-faced girl would turn out to be a powerhouse, carrying 2 thermos flasks. She said to the girl frozen on the stairs, "Come on, let's head up too." The girl snapped out of her daze and hurriedly introduced herself. "Hi, I'm Wanda, a freshman in ammunition engineering. Your friend is seriously amazing." Rachel felt honored and nodded in agreement. "She's exceptionally talented. Her name is Susan. I'm also a student of ammunition engineering. My name is Rachel." When they reached the 7th floor, the 3 realized they were actually roommates, and the 4th roommate has arrived. She had neat short hair, handsome features, and an aloof demeanor, speaking in a concise and straightforward manner. "Valerie." With that, she took her seat and said nothing more. The 3 exchanged glances and took turns introducing themselves. Valerie merely responded with a faint hum, appearing rather unenthusiastic. Wanda adjusted her glasses. "Classmate Valerie, you're not from the ammunition engineering program, are you?" Rachel looked at her and asked in confusion, "How did you know?" "I glanced at it when signing in." Susan widened her eyes into perfect circles and gave her a thumbs up. Photographic memory. Impressive. Meanwhile, Valerie never even lifted her eyelids the entire time, still just responding with a faint All 4 roommates had gathered in the dorm. Though they came from different places and had distinct personalities, they managed to get along quite well. Yet those 2 boxes that Susan had effortlessly carried in turned out to be completely filled with books. One could only imagine how heavy they must have been. Even the aloof Valerie, who usually couldn't be bothered to speak, couldn't help but glance at Susan a few more times after seeing Wanda open the boxes. After all, she had also witnessed Susan rushing into the room carrying a box. Rachel's mouth twitched involuntarily as she pointed at the box on the floor and asked Wanda, "How did you bring so many books to school?" Wanda randomly pulled out a copy of The Making of Nuclear Weapons from the box, cradling it like a treasure, kissing it repeatedly. "This is my soul food." Rachel turned to look at Susan again. "How did you just pick up and run with such a heavy box?" Susan stripped off her outer shirt, revealing the formidable muscles and solid arms that her tank top couldn't conceal. "Since childhood, I've worked the fields and herded cattle. When the ox wouldn't obey, I'd carry it and run." Wanda's glasses slid down to the tip of her nose as she gasped, "That ox had quite the nerve daring to disobey you." The silent Valerie suddenly sprang to her feet. "If you're so formidable, why don't you enlist and fight on the front lines?" A sudden, nonsensical accusation left all 3 frozen in place. Susan even more flustered as she shuffled closer to Rachel, unsure how to respond. Rachel was in no hurry to speak. Her gaze swept over Valerie's clenched fists, veins bulging, muscle contours sharply defined, knuckles layered with thick calluses. These were the marks of years of relentless training, but her palms were smooth, untouched by gunfire. Rachel had already made up her mind. Though phrased as a question, it was a statement. "You originally wanted to enlist for the front lines, not attend university." Valerie pressed her lips together, tacitly acknowledging the truth. "TSK, Wanda adjusted her glasses. Don't tell me your family altered your application and forced you here. After all, studying at the National University is far safer than soldiering on the front lines." Valerie flashed a glance, frowning as she asked, "What, you too?" Wanda waved her hands repeatedly. "No, I'm not. When I said I wanted to study the giant mushroom and blow up Little Persimmon Island. My grandparents were so thrilled they almost bought tickets on the spot to move the whole family with me." Hearing this, Valerie lowered her head slightly, her mood somber. "I was supposed to join the military, but instead I was sent to school." Hearing this, Wanda quickly offered comfort. "Don't be so downcast. Think about it, how many enemies can you take down barehanded? Firepower saturation is the ultimate way, when our country's missiles can reach any corner of the world. The whole world will have to listen to our voice, and our soldiers won't have to face enemy artillery fire with their own bodies anymore," Rachel added. Susan nodded repeatedly beside her. "Mr. Nyopeng once said that the future world will be an information-driven one, and wars between major powers will no longer be confined to human resistance. That's why a nation must possess cutting-edge superweapons." Rachel felt a tremor in her heart, having been reborn. She knew everything they said was true, but had it been before her rebirth, she would never have possessed such insight. No wonder she had failed so miserably in her past life. She smiled self-deprecatingly, but the light of faith quickly rose again in her eyes. Nikolai Ostrovsky wrote in asterisk how the steel was tempered asterisk, "Man's dearest possession is life, and it is given to him but once, but since heaven had given her a second life, she would forge herself into steel anew, this time. No one could stand in her way." What a pity that a visionary scholar like Mr. Nyopeng, with his far-sighted and progressive thinking, met such a fate. Falling just before dawn remains his eternal regret. But one day when the spring breeze sweeps across, Susan will change this world in his stead. The four girls gradually became acquainted as military training began. On just the first night, Susan came back in tears. Wanda followed beside her, somewhat at a loss. While Rachel only pressed her lips together in silence, saying nothing, Valerie wasn't in the same major as them. After finishing her wash, she came in, took in the scene, and without minding her dripping hair, walked over and asked with a frown, "What's wrong with Susan?" Wanda's glasses reflected a cold glint. Susan's braid was too long to wear a helmet, but the instructor's words were truly too harsh. Susan merely explained a couple of sentences. Yet he punished Susan to stand under the sun all afternoon. Susan sobbed as she raised her head. "It's my fault. I couldn't bear to cut my braid. But she paused, rubbing the hem of her clothes with both hands, as if steeling herself for some resolution. She slowly reached out her hand, grasping the nearby Rachel. Struggling to keep her voice steady, "Rachel, could you cut my hair for me?" A moment later, Rachel clutched that thick, glossy black hair, scissors in hand, and asked softly, "Susan, are you ready?" Susan wanted to answer, but the moment she opened her mouth, tears once again fell uncontrollably. She could only nod vigorously, covering her mouth to stifle her sobs. Rachel pursed her lips and said solemnly, "Susan, don't worry, I'll give you a nice, cool haircut, even if your mother finds out. She won't blame you." Hearing this, Susan burst into loud wails. "Go ahead and cut it. My ma can't see anymore. She's dead. She knew I couldn't escape while she was alive, so she hanged herself with a rope one night." Rachel suddenly jerked the scissors in her hand, leaving a bloody scratch on her knuckles. She wiped it away hastily, then turned to brush the tears from the corner of her eye. Wanda's glasses were blurred with tears. Valerie's eyes also reddened. Rachel took a deep breath and steadied her scissor-holding hand. Steadying her composure, she spoke, "Susan, what you've cut away isn't just hair, it's shackles and the past. Mountains can't confine you, wildfires can't consume you, and the sufferings of this world cannot defeat you." Snip, snip, snip. The severed long hair was Rachel clutched tightly in her palm. Wanda braided it into a plait. Valerie tied it with Susan's usual hairband. Susan held it and gazed for a long time. She sniffled, forced a smile, and asked everyone, "Does it look nice?" The three answered in unison, "It does." National Defense University, Women's Dormitory 702, Rachel, wrapped in a blanket and drowsy, suddenly shuddered as if experiencing weightlessness like being pushed off a cliff. Her eyes snapped open instantly, all sleepiness gone. Cold sweat trickled down her back. She clutched the blanket and sat up quietly, leaning against the wall behind her. Neil's face involuntarily surfaced in her mind. She shook her head, trying to shake off those images. Why think of him? He should be happy now that I'm gone. Rachel sat for a while, listening to her roommate's breathing and the rhythmic chirping of insects outside the window. Drowsiness soon washed over her. Thinking about tomorrow's training, she yawned again and curled up under the covers. Before long, she sank into a deep slumber. In her dream, she returned to the laboratory of her past life. But this time, the experiment didn't fail, she succeeded. In her deep slumber, Rachel curled her lips into a smile. a single tear slipping from the corner of her eye onto the pillowcase. But it was just that one tear. A week later, at dusk, after the training session, Rachel walked back with the other three from the dorm. They had planned to grab something to eat at the cafeteria, but the line was too long. "We've been exhausted all day. You guys go back first. I'll stay here to buy food and bring it back for everyone," Susan said to the three behind her as she looked at the orderly long queue ahead. Rachel certainly wasn't willing to leave her alone. "That won't do. How could I let you stand in this long cafeteria line by yourself? I'll stay with you. Really, it's unnecessary. If you go back now, you can shower earlier. Some can eat while others shower. We'll stagger our time and save a lot. Listen to me, you go ahead first." The three couldn't persuade her otherwise and had no choice but to return to the dorm first. About an hour had passed. They finished washing up. Wanda rubbed her hair while looking down from the windowsill. Not far away, a crowd had gathered for some unknown reason and was moving in a mighty procession toward the building below. She paid no attention, focusing only on searching for Susan, muttering to herself, "Why hasn't Susan come back yet? Could she not manage on her own? Should we go down to get her?" Rachel nodded, hung up the towel, and stood up. Valerie also slipped on an armor-green short-sleeved shirt. Just as the three were about to head out, the belated Susan rushed in carrying 4 meals, while shouting, "It's bad, Rachel, run, someone's coming to get you." "What?" Wanda and Valerie spoke in unison, their faces full of confusion. Even Rachel herself was completely baffled. She stepped forward to take the items from Susan's hands, helping the breathless woman sit down while soothing her. "What exactly happened? Susan, take your time and explain. Don't rush." Wanda promptly handed her a mug of water. Susan gulped it down in several loud swallows, calming herself slightly, though her voice remained urgent. "Rachel, remember last time, when I said my stepfather wanted to sell me off, and you told me you'd also run away from home? Just now when I came back, I saw a huge, fierce-looking man asking about you. I don't know how he got in, but he's already here. He must be coming to drag you back and sell you off again. Run, quick." Rachel froze, suddenly realizing she hadn't properly explained things to Susan last time, and the only person who would come here looking for her would be Neil, no one else. But shouldn't he be celebrating right now? Why would he come looking for her? She was just about to explain when Wanda let out a furious roar. Brandishing 2 alcohol bottles she dug up from who knows where, her face twisted in anger. "Such a thing actually exists. I'll blow him to pieces." Meanwhile, Valerie had already silently wrapped several loops of thin chain around her fist. Susan frowned, her expression filled with regret. "I shouldn't have come up. I should have run him over downstairs." "Wait." As the three were about to charge downstairs for a fight, Rachel quickly pulled them back. "Wait. Listen to me, no one's selling me. I swear, don't be afraid. I'll make sure that bastard doesn't leave here in one piece." Wanda held a match in her left hand and an alcohol bottle in her right. Her eyes gleaming coldly behind her glasses, she looked like a terrorist ready to blow up the school at any moment. Valerie had a murderous look on her face. Susan was brimming with brute strength. Rachel exerted every ounce of her strength to barely hold them back. Setting aside emotional entanglements to briefly explain the situation, the three of them finally breathed a sigh of relief. "Ah, but he really does look terrifying. We should still go down with you." Rachel couldn't resist. The 4 of them went downstairs together. With just one glance, she confirmed her suspicion. It was him, Neil, and Neil was instantly captivated the moment Rachel appeared. His attention completely seized. His feet moved forward uncontrollably, his throat inexplicably tightening, but after just a few steps, he sensed a murderous aura. Behind Rachel stood 3 other girls, glaring at him fiercely. Their eyes seemed to say, "I'll keep watching you, forever, forever." His eyebrow twitched. Without paying much attention to these young girls, he walked straight toward Rachel. "Rachel." Neil rushed forward in a few quick steps, trying to grab Rachel's hand, only to see her abruptly take a step back. Her calm tone carried a warning. "Uncle, this is a school." Her voice was soft, yet it made Neil freeze in place, a flash of pain flickering in his eyes. "Rachel, you left without a word, not even a single message for me. Do you really want to cut all ties with me?" Hearing this, Rachel frowned at him, then suddenly smiled. "Uncle, I left you many messages before. Every day you weren't home, I would write so many. It was you who told me to stop doing that. Now why are you blaming me for not leaving you even a single word? I'm grateful to the Owen family for taking me in, grateful for your care, thankful you gave me another home. If you didn't want to see me, I left. Why are you looking for me now?" Rachel's voice held not a trace of emotion, calm as if narrating some trivial matter, yet it was precisely this attitude that left Neil rooted to the spot. His lips trembling as he couldn't utter another word, he wanted to tell Rachel it wasn't like that, it wasn't what she thought, Yet, he couldn't bring himself to speak, he couldn't face that version of himself, much less Rachel. After a long silence, he gazed at the girl he had been thinking about day and night, and simply asked, "Rachel, have you been doing well here?" "I'm doing well, thank you for your concern, Uncle. I'm an adult now, and I understand things. There's no need to come see me anymore, our final goodbye was already said long ago." With that, Rachel turned to walk back inside, but was Neil grabbed by the arm. He frowned, his eyes filled with a confusion Rachel couldn't comprehend. "Rachel, how could you become like this?" He looked utterly innocent. It seemed his differential treatment, deliberate coldness and indifference were all inconsequential, while Rachel was expected to remain obedient, silently enduring everything. Hearing this, Rachel slowly pulled her hand away from his, just as he had once shaken her off. Turning back, her eyes were already filled with stillness. "The same question I once wanted to ask Uncle, the same thing. But now, none of it matters anymore. Uncle, I'll always remember your kindness, but let's not meet again." With that, Rachel turned and walked into the dormitory building. Neil tried to step forward but was blocked by 3 people. Susan spread her arms to block the doorway. Valerie raised a hand in a clear gesture of refusal. Wanda didn't mince words either. "Stop right there, sir, this is the girls' dormitory." Neil could do nothing but watch helplessly as Rachel's figure disappeared around the corner. He shuddered and took a step back as if drained of strength. The image of that obedient, eager to please little girl in his mind simply wouldn't align with the retreating figure walking away before him. Neil couldn't understand how the girl who once gazed at him with such adoration could change so quickly, or perhaps, he was the one who'd never truly understood his own feelings. It's not Rachel, but him. Neil stood downstairs at the dormitory for a long time. He didn't leave until all the lights went out. The temperature was high, and the early autumn night was not only not cold, but also somewhat stiflingly hot. Yet, he felt his hands and feet trembling with cold. When Rachel confessed her feelings to him, all he felt was shock, followed by self-reflection. He was her uncle, how could she fall for her? This is utterly absurd. Yet just now, the very moment he watched Rachel walk away before his eyes, he suddenly realized the source of the panic in his heart. It was the fear of losing. The terror of losing Rachel, not just the little girl who occasionally teased him by calling him big brother or chased after him shouting uncle, but also the brave young woman who was willing to lay bare her heart. Yet now, it seemed he had already lost her. The details he had overlooked surfaced in his mind. He thought distance would help her recognize her own feelings, to understand that admiration differs from love. In the end, it was he who fell deeply into it. Just as Rachel said, the one who kept hiding was him, the one who turned a blind eye and deaf ear to her. Why couldn't he feel even the slightest bit happy now that she had truly left and stopped pestering him? The answer was on the tip of his tongue, yet he refused to face it. He refused to face Rachel, the one who had stirred his heart when she confessed her feelings. A long time passed. Neil halted in his tracks, gazing at the pitch-black night sky as a bitter laugh escaped his lips. On the other side, in the girls' dormitory room 702, the lights were already off, only the faintest shallow breaths rose and fell in the room. All 4 were awake, yet none broke the silent understanding between them. Rachel curled up in the blanket without saying a word. Meeting Neil today was merely to make up for the regret of not saying goodbye. After all, the Owen family had shown her kindness, and if Neil hadn't come, she would never have disturbed them again in this lifetime. But when he came, she couldn't bring herself to ignore him after all. A faint sigh pierced the quiet night with unusual clarity. "Don't sigh like that, you'll blow all your good luck away." Susan spoke softly, yet her words gently reached everyone's ears. Wanda rolled over, propped herself up on one elbow and put on her glasses, as if only then could she properly hear what others were saying. "Did Mr. Stephen say this one too?" Susan nuzzled into the blanket, her voice dropping a few notes, sounding muffled. "This one was my mom who said it." "You're right. We shouldn't sigh." Valerie spoke up unusually, just to prove she was still awake. Wanda adjusted her glasses, her eyes burning with gossip, and whispered, "Rachel, was that person who came to see you today the uncle you mentioned? He seemed really odd." "Yeah, the way he looked at you didn't seem like, I don't know, but he did seem strange," Susan added while clinging to the bed rail. Rachel remained silent for a long time before finally peeking out from under her covers, pursing her lips. She hesitated before saying, "He hates me." In the darkness, Valerie furrowed her brows. "That's not the look of someone who dislikes another person." Her voice was calm, yet filled with conviction. Rachel closed her eyes briefly, forcing out the suffocating weight in her chest before continuing. "He was originally very kind to me, taking great care of me after I became an orphan. But I fell for him. When I was 17, I confessed to him, and after that, he started to dislike me." "Wow." From across the way, Wanda exclaimed, You confessed to him, that's so brave. Rachel felt a pang in her heart and asked in surprise, don't you think it's absurd that I confessed to my uncle? You're not even blood related, Valerie said in a flat tone. Exactly, even blood relatives can be together, right? There are so many examples in history, nieces marrying uncles, sisters marrying brothers, emperors wedding their stepmothers, cousins getting married. Susan counted them off on her fingers, reciting them like a well-rehearsed list. Wanda gasped and exclaimed, Mr. Stephen's range of interests is truly vast. Susan chuckled, no, these are things I read on my own. With this banter, the atmosphere in the dorm immediately lightened considerably. As they spoke, the conversation circled back to Rachel. So you came here just to stay away from from that man? Wanda continued asking. Rachel shook her head, her gaze falling on the sliver of moonlight seeping through the curtain gap as she recalled events from her past life. In her previous life, after getting married, she resumed her studies and was admitted to a relatively ordinary university, where she studied medical nursing. Later, while working at a hospital, she happened to meet a patient. His body was severely affected by radiation, and he had no children or family to care for him, apart from the occasional students who came to visit. The ward was almost empty all day long, with only himself inside. His bed was piled with blueprints, and he would write and sketch incessantly every day, muttering words no one could understand. Few were willing to approach him, except for Rachel, who always wanted to chat with him a little longer. As time passed, the elderly man in the twilight of his years came to regard her as his own student, always with endless words to say and boundless knowledge to impart. Rachel was so captivated by these pieces of data that she quit her hospital job outright, devoting herself full-time to caring for the old man. When not at the hospital, she enrolled in night school to fill the gaps in her chemistry knowledge. The more she learned, the more fascinated she became. But the old man's body had long been like an oil-depleted lamp, barely holding on for 3 years in the hospital, deteriorating day by day. In his final moments, he left Rachel only a stack of blueprints, a notebook, and a letter of introduction. The letter contained just a few simple words. Let Rachel join the research institute. Ray. At this thought, Rachel closed her eyes, unable to conceal the sorrow in her voice. I promised someone to complete an experiment. I can't break my word. She wanted to see Ray. She wanted to support this project with Ray before he collapsed. She dared not forget those experimental data and stacks of blueprints for even a moment. She would always remember the old man's hunched back yet unwavering spine on the hospital bed. She thought Neil wouldn't come again after their meeting. Yet the next day, Rachel still encountered him at school. He stood so straight by the roadside that passers-by couldn't help but glance his way, making him impossible to ignore. Rachel had intended to walk past him and leave directly, but his gaze remained fixed on her like a persistent thorn in her back. Rachel. Is your uncle a sniper or something? His stare is like a knife, it's making me so uncomfortable. Susan clung to her arm, deliberately lowering her voice as if afraid Neil might hear from over 10 meters away. Rachel patted the back of her hand in reassurance, yet she couldn't pinpoint exactly which part had gone wrong. Logically speaking, Neil should have been relieved after she left, with no reason to seek her out again. But he came. If he was upset because I didn't say goodbye properly, well, I did say goodbye yesterday. What's he doing here again? Could it be, last night? Wanda's words echoed in my ears again. But I think that look in his eyes meant he likes you. When you kept your distance, he looked so heartbroken. We all thought it was because you didn't like him and wanted nothing to do with him. At these thoughts, Rachel violently shook her head, dispelling those voices. Impossible. The person he truly loves is Naomi. They're meant to have children together someday. Rachel. You have nothing to do with him anymore. Take a deep breath. Rachel ignored the sharp gaze behind her and walked away directly with Susan. For several days in a row, Neil would appear on Rachel's usual path, sometimes on the way to class, sometimes heading to the cafeteria, and other times just waiting right outside the dormitory building. Yet he just stood there, neither initiating conversation nor making any move to stop Rachel, as if merely checking whether she was doing well. The first one who couldn't take it anymore was Wanda. After yet another instance of returning to the dorm and being subjected to Neil's unwavering gaze the entire way, she finally climbed onto Rachel's bed in frustration. Rachel, who had been reading before bed, froze as a fluffy head suddenly nestled against her chest, still muttering, "It's terrifying, Rachel, absolutely terrifying. Every time I see his eyes, I want to throw a Molotov cocktail at him. If this continues, I'll definitely get expelled from school." Rachel put down her book and reached out to ruffle her hair. Truth be told, she had also been thinking that Neil staying at school indefinitely wasn't a solution. Even if other students didn't recognize him, it still wasn't ideal for the roommates. Wanda's words solidified her resolve to address the issue once and for all. "I'll handle it as soon as possible." She patted Wanda's back and flashed a reassuring smile. Then she rolled out of bed and headed downstairs. Outside the dormitory, Neil stood by the roadside, straight as a poplar tree. Rachel took a deep breath, composed her emotions, and tried to make her expression appear more calm and aloof. From the moment she appeared, Neil's gaze never left her, until Rachel walked step by step to stand before him. Their gazes collided, and his heart trembled imperceptibly. His Adam's apple bobbed as he finally spoke first. "It's so late, why did you come down?" Rachel didn't answer his question, but calmly countered instead, "It's so late, Uncle, why are you still here? I submitted a leave request to my unit and school, but only got 1 week. If you don't want to see me, I'll just spend more time looking at you." "Uncle, I don't understand." Rachel stared straight at him, as if trying to see through his eyes and discern what was truly on his mind. Neil looked momentarily stunned. "What?" Rachel gazed into those eyes, watching as the coldness dissipated, replaced by a long-lost warmth. Why? Was it because he had confirmed she truly didn't like him anymore, and decided to treat her kindly as before? But now, she no longer needed it at all. The Rachel who loved him, respected him, and saw not a single flaw in him. Rachel had already died in the explosion of her past life. "Uncle, I told you I wouldn't bother you anymore. Why are you still doing this? When I was around, you ignored me. Now that I'm gone, you come looking for me from thousands of miles away. Uncle, I really don't understand why you're doing this. I've already complied with your wishes. Why must you go this far?" Her gaze was calm and composed, as if she had become a different person. It made Neil feel utterly unfamiliar. "Rachel, you never used to say things like this." Rachel suddenly found it somewhat amusing, her gaze towards Neil carrying a trace of confusion and bewilderment. "Uncle, you never used to abandon me for others, never deliberately ignored me in front of other people, and certainly never forced me to eat things I couldn't handle. So, which before are you referring to? Was it before you deliberately hurt me to push me away, or before I never gave up and kept chasing after you, Uncle?" "That was before, just before. Everything is in the past now. I have my life, and you have yours. We won't be together forever." At this very moment, Neil finally realized there should have been a better way to handle this relationship, yet he chose the worst possible approach. He opened his mouth but didn't dare meet Rachel's eyes. "Rachel, I'm sorry. It's all right. I forgive you." Rachel's response was extraordinarily magnanimous. Neil's eyes flashed with a glimmer of joy as he lifted his head in disbelief. Then, Rachel's next sentence plunged him back into hell. "Please also forgive my immature persistence before. I won't appear again in the future, and you needn't think of me anymore. I'll bless you and Naomi with a harmonious marriage and the joy of children. Uncle, let's not see each other anymore." With that, Rachel turned to leave, but Neil grabbed her and pulled her tightly into his arms. "No, Rachel. Listen to me, it's not what you think between Naomi and me. We have nothing. I never planned to marry her. All the blame is mine. We all know what she did, and your parents have stopped caring about her. They deeply regret it now. Rachel, could you give me one more chance?" Rachel suddenly smiled. Though a hint of mockery flashed in her eyes, Neil didn't miss the emotion in her gaze, yet he forcefully suppressed the bitterness rising in his heart. "Rachel, don't give up on me." As he spoke, his eyes had already reddened, yet Rachel found everything before her utterly ridiculous. This kind of Neil was rare. She'd only seen it once in her memory. It was because of Neil's rabbit leg that she had an allergic reaction and was sent to the hospital. Back then, Neil was just 18. He carried the 13-year-old Rachel in his arms, running frantically toward the hospital, sweat and tears mingling as they fell drop by drop onto her. The pain had turned Rachel's face pale. Yet she still mustered the strength to lift her hand and wipe the sweat from his temple. At that moment, he choked out a promise. "Rachel, I won't let you get hurt again, never again." But that was the 18-year-old Neil, not the 22-year-old Neil, much less the 24-year-old Neil. Promises are just promises, just empty words. "Neil," hearing his name, Neil looked up, his gaze towards Rachel filled with pleading and hope, yet in Rachel's eyes, there was only coldness. "Right now, you strike me as utterly absurd." Neil, the light in his eyes crumbled word by word under her assault, eventually transforming into glistening tears that dissolved into the night. "Did you come looking for me because you realized you love me, or because my sudden departure slipped from your control, or perhaps, you've simply grown accustomed to having someone like me trailing after you, never leaving your side?" Neil swallowed hard, but not a single word came out, seeing his silence. Rachel let out a cold laugh and turned to walk into the dormitory building. "No, Rachel, I really do like you," Neil hurriedly explained, wanting to chase after her, but his feet seemed rooted to the ground, unable to move an inch. While Rachel had moved far enough to hear Neil's words clearly, yet her footsteps didn't hesitate for even a moment. "Neil, we all keep moving forward, don't look back." 10 years later, City J, conference hall entrance, Neil instructed his team in a low voice. "Get into position, make sure there are no disturbances. This press conference must go flawlessly." 10 years had honed his appearance into one of mature resolve, his commanding presence impossible to ignore. The walkie-talkie responded, "Copy that, every door has someone guarding it." In the solemn and dignified conference room, on the rostrum, a meticulously prepared podium stood, flanked by national flags on either side. With the iconic emblem of Red Star One gleaming brilliantly at the center, below, hundreds of media journalists from around the world have taken their positions, with camera lenses glinting under the lights. Naomi, dressed in professional attire with a press badge, held a microphone in front of the camera. The atmosphere here is unusually tense, with journalists from various countries gathered, waiting for the mysterious veil of Red Star One to be unveiled. Reporters from different nations are also working at full throttle to cover the event. This is not just a press conference, it's a historic moment that may redraw the global security landscape. "I just received intelligence that the technological breakthrough potentially involved in Red Star One could have profound implications for future military balance," the TV director shouted into his headset. 3 minutes to air, all cameras confirm, we're bringing this moment to the nation. To the world, an unspoken yet intense excitement filled the air, with every pair of eyes fixed on the podium, awaiting that pivotal moment. Ray was supported by Rachel as they walked step by step toward the podium. The previously restless venue fell silent in an instant. Everyone held their breath. Anticipating this historic moment, Rachel helped Ray adjust the microphone. After a burst of screeching feedback, Ray's aged yet steady voice slowly emerged. "Distinguished guests and members of the press, at this historic juncture of the century's turn, we proudly present to the world our nation's latest achievements in defense technology with immense excitement. Red Star One Advanced Air Defense Missile System. Next, we'll have Rachel. Rachel, Deputy Chief Designer of Red Star One, present the report." Ray's voice was aged but full of enthusiasm. He extended his hand toward Rachel. Looking at her with the pride of a parent gazing upon their most accomplished child, 2 lifetimes as teacher and student, weathering storms together, this time, they finally outpaced fate to complete the passing of their mission. In full military uniform, Rachel stood up and strode to the center of the podium. Delivering a fluid and textbook-perfect salute, she stood resolute and confident, her gaze fixed steadily ahead, eyes shining with both glory and conviction. Then, she took over Ray under the spotlight and slowly unveiled the mystery of the Red Star One. Red Star One combines the latest guidance technology with composite materials science, achieving unprecedented interception accuracy and reaction speed. It can efficiently identify, track, and shoot down various aerial threats, including stealth aircraft and hypersonic missiles. Meanwhile, Red Star One employs a dual-locking mechanism of active radar guidance and infrared imaging technology, ensuring target acquisition accuracy and flexibility. Its unique flight control system enables highly maneuverable flight within complex atmospheric conditions, significantly improving interception efficiency. The press conference immediately attracted extensive coverage from journalists both domestically and internationally, making the front-page headline of the Millo Times that same day. Military news: Red Star One, a new chapter in our nation's air defense missile technology. National Defense News, a groundbreaking achievement. Red Star One leads the new trend in air defense technology. Asterisk the Millo Times asterisk. Red Star One, a showcase of air defense missile excellence. The press conference had just concluded. As a journalist, Naomi blocked Rachel's path. "Rachel, long time no see." Naomi wore a proper smile, but her eyes kept glancing toward the door as she spoke. "I never expected you to become the Deputy Chief Designer of Anti-Aircraft Missiles now, after all these years without any news of you. I thought, never mind that, since you're back in Beijing, would you like to visit the old man? He's getting on in years and often talks about the past. He mentions you frequently. But neither uncle nor I had any way to reach you. We didn't even know how to bring you up. You left without a word back then. That was really quite willful of you." Rachel remained expressionless, as if oblivious to her veiled accusations and subtle bragging. She merely glanced down at Naomi's name badge, then said calmly, "Miss Reporter, are these remarks of yours conference questions or simply catching up?" Without waiting for Naomi's response, she continued, "If they're questions, they're irrelevant to the meeting. If it's catching up, let's do that another time." With that said, she packed her things, supported Ray, and left the venue under the protection of the crowd. Not far away, unaware of what the two had discussed. Neil could only watch Rachel's retreating figure, lost in thought for a long time. As the crowd dispersed, Naomi finally stomped her foot in frustration. The smile on her face could no longer be maintained, yet Neil never once glanced at her, as if Naomi simply didn't exist. Returning to the Hongqi car, Ray wore an expression of complex profundity. Mingling relief, sentimentality, and a touch of melancholy, tears glistened in aged eyes, where the frost of time intertwined with the radiance of ideals. As the corners of his lips curled into a satisfied smile, "Rachel, we've succeeded. With the birth of Red Star 1, America's military hegemony monopoly won't last much longer." Ray's gaze fixed ahead, his eyes brimming with both nostalgia and emotion. Beside him, Rachel grasped his withered, mottled hand, calloused and wrinkled, speaking softly yet with extraordinary solemnity. "Teacher, rest assured, we won't just have Red Star 1, we'll have 5, 6, we'll take it step by step, making sure the world hears our voice. Red Star 1 has been fully unveiled to the world. 2 and 3 have already been successfully developed and are ready for combat deployment at any time. 4 is currently in the research and development phase. The Project 5 and Project 6 road initiatives are currently in the planning stage." Ray nodded with emotion, patting Rachel's hand reassuringly. "Rachel, thank you. Knowing our country has young people like you puts my mind at ease." As he finished speaking, his hunched body trembled, and he broke into violent coughing. A pristine white handkerchief now bore fresh crimson stains. Rachel knew Ray's time was running out. Yet his eyes showed no trace of fear towards death, only the calm composure of one who had weathered life's storms. "I never thought I'd complete this steadfast and noble mission before my life's end. You've shown me hope and helped fulfill my ideal. Meeting you kids is my good fortune." At the same time, deep in the western desert, inside the command tent, Wanda stared at the electronic display with a furrowed brow. One lens of her glasses was covered in cracks, her face smeared with dust. Yet her gaze remained bright and resolute. Suddenly, she grabbed the walkie-talkie and issued a decisive order. "All positions, stand ready. 3, 2, 1, launch." Before the words had fully left his mouth, a missile launched from its rack with a deafening roar, streaking across the sky like a silver lightning bolt. In the monitoring room, everyone held their breath, eyes locked on the missile's trajectory displayed on the screens. They watched as it deftly evaded countermeasures and locked onto the target drone high in the atmosphere with pinpoint accuracy. The moment two light trails intersected in midair, the explosion's firelight illuminated half the sky. The target drone shattered, instantly transforming into a cloud of dust. Experiment successful. Thunderous cheers erupted across the site. Wanda was swept into a tight embrace by Susan, who had rushed into the venue, spun several times mid-air, and was finally set down feeling completely dizzy. "Wonderful. The Red Star No. 4 experiment was a success. I wish Rachel and Ray could hear this good news right away." Wanda adjusted her glasses and vigorously rubbed her chest. "They will. They'll know." Rachel put down the phone, unable to conceal the excitement on her face. She quickly walked over to Ray. The elderly man in the chair faced the fading sunset through the floor-to-ceiling window, his eyes tightly shut. His head slightly tilted to one side, a blanket covered his body, and 4 needle pierced the back of his hand. His breathing was faint and shallow, he appeared aged and fragile. Rachel slowly crouched down until she was at eye level with the old man. Her voice was soft, as if afraid to disturb him. "Teacher, the number 4 experiment was successful." The old man didn't open his eyes. A hoarse sound escaped his throat, and after a long while, he finally murmured a single word, "Good." Dusk approached as the setting sun vanished behind the mountains. Come tomorrow, the sun will still rise in the east. The passing of the torch between generations is both a transition and a continuation. A few days later, at the Owens residence, Rachel stood at the doorstep in casual clothes, holding numerous bags in her hands. After hesitating for a long while, she finally took a deep breath and rang the doorbell. The housekeeper came trotting over, squinting through the gaps in the gate railing for a moment before suddenly brightening up. With evident delight, she swung the gate open and ushered Rachel inside, still shouting loudly, "Old man, Rachel is back, Rachel is back." Grandpa Owen leaned on his cane and hurried out of the house. His posture was no longer as upright as before, his back hunched, and his once salt and pepper hair had now turned completely white. "Rachel." He staggered over to Rachel and barely dared to recognize the person standing before him. Rachel's eyes reddened in an instant. "Grandpa, it's me, I'm back." Overwhelmed by a surge of deep guilt, Rachel choked back sobs as her vision blurred repeatedly. Grandpa Owen clutched her hands tightly, his smile warm and kind. Coming back is good enough." As he spoke, he suddenly seemed to remember something and turned to the housekeeper. saying, "Quick, go buy groceries, get all of Rachel's favorites, steamed pork ribs, yellow croaker, buy plenty, and Neil. Call him and tell him to come home." Hearing this, Rachel quickly grabbed Grandpa Owen's arm. She spoke with some difficulty. "Grandpa, Uncle is busy, let's not disturb him." Grandpa Owen looked at Rachel, understanding everything perfectly well, but ultimately said nothing, just waving dismissively at the housekeeper. "Go buy groceries quickly." Grandpa Owen pulled Rachel into the house and asked her about everything that had happened over the past few years. Looking at the little girl who used to follow him around calling Grandpa, Grandpa, now grown into a graceful young woman, his eyes were filled with unconcealable admiration and joy, especially since she had become a courageous and resolute soldier, a ballistics weapons engineer. "I saw the news the other day. Rachel, you did well." Hearing Grandpa Owen's praise, Rachel smiled softly. She said gratefully, "Grandpa, without you, I wouldn't be where I am today. All of this is thanks to your support and encouragement back then. Thank you, Grandpa." Rachel poured a cup of tea and handed it to Grandpa Owen with both hands. Grandpa Owen nodded, took it, and had a sip. "It's all your own hard work. What I did was just the icing on the cake." The grandfather and grandson sat together, exchanging pleasantries with tacit understanding. Rachel told Grandpa Owen many things that had happened to her over the past 10 years. Grandpa Owen listened while nodding slowly, occasionally asking a question or two, interacting with Rachel. Hearing that she had nowhere to go during winter break, she frowned even more bitterly when a classmate invited her home. "This is all Neil's fault. If it weren't for him, how could you have not gone home for 10 years? But your friend Xiao Li is really nice. Going home together, even during winter break, still feels like being in the dorm, lively and fun." Finally, he added somewhat plaintively, "It's not like here, where all the life seems to vanish after you leave." Hearing this, Rachel suddenly thought of Naomi, whom she had met a few days earlier. She couldn't help but say, "I ran into Naomi at the venue the other day. She mentioned she often comes here to keep you company. She and Uncle have been married for quite a while, haven't they?" Grandpa Owen frowned, his eyes filled with confusion. "What, them getting married, and she often keeps me company? What could she possibly do with me? Nonsense." Grandpa Owen pulled a stern face, then after a moment's thought, tentatively spoke up, "Rachel, is there some misunderstanding between you and Neil? I always thought there was something odd about that letter you left behind. Grandpa guarantees you, there hasn't been a single other woman by side all these years you've been away." He was slow to realize his feelings. Back when you liked him, he didn't understand his own heart and kept rejecting you. But later he went looking for you too, though it seems he got rejected himself. Haha, don't you dare listen to those troublemakers spreading nonsense. Grandpa Owen's gaze involuntarily drifted toward the doorway. Rachel lowered her eyelids and slowly took a sip of tea. A faint smile appeared on her face. "Let's not talk about Grandpa's past matters anymore. Back then, I was too young and naive, mistaking familial dependence for affection. I won't make that mistake now." Clatter. There was a sound of a bag hitting the ground from behind. Rachel turned her head toward the source of the sound. There stood Neil at the door, covered in dust, with fruits scattered all over the floor. He stood at the door, his eyes filled with disbelief, as if he couldn't believe what he had just heard. Neil's lips trembled as he stared at Rachel, unable to utter a single word. "Rachel," after a long silence. His voice carried a faint tremor as he stepped forward, each footfall weighted with unbearable heaviness. Rachel met his gaze, yet the face that once made her heart flutter now left her utterly unmoved. "Uncle, you're back." Rachel's voice was calm, devoid of excessive emotional fluctuations. She had long since let go of this past in her heart. Neil approached, reaching out to touch her face, but Rachel gently avoided his hand. She didn't look at Neil again, but stood up to say goodbye to Grandpa Owen. "Grandpa, I have something to attend to, so I'll take my leave now. I'll come see you another day." Grandpa Owen reached out his hand, his eyes filled with reluctance. Yet in the end, all that remained was a helpless sigh. "Rachel, take care of yourself out there, and come visit Grandpa when you have time." "I will. You take care of yourself too." After saying goodbye to Grandpa Owen, Rachel left without hesitation. The moment she brushed past Neil, Neil trembled, his hands shaking as if trying to stop her from leaving. Yet in the end, he did nothing. It wasn't until Rachel was about to get into the car that Neil hurriedly chased after her through the gate. "Rachel, Neil's words trailed off abruptly, realizing he didn't even know where to begin. Rachel smiled faintly, a smile devoid of hatred or love, carrying only a sense of release. "Uncle, you must have heard what I just said. Every word I said came from the heart. You once said I was too young to understand love, now I do, so, I wish you find your happiness soon." Neil stood frozen in place, watching as Rachel turned and got into the car, as if he were merely a passerby. At last, He understood some losses can never be undone. Grandpa Owen leaned on his cane, watching the scene unfold with a flicker of complexity in his eyes. After Rachel left, Neil stood frozen in place for a long time. Grandpa Owen walked out slowly, patted him on the shoulder, and said nothing more, yet that wordless comfort stirred a bitter ache in his heart. If he had listened to his father earlier and recognized his own heart, he and Rachel wouldn't have missed each other. It seemed she had seen through his thoughts. Grandpa Owen clasped his hands behind his back and let out a laugh that was hard to tell whether it was regret or mockery. I told you long ago to treat that girl better, or else when she really leaves you, you won't even have a place to cry. Back then you stubbornly said you didn't like it. Now you're regretting it, aren't you? Too late for regrets now. Neil let out a bitter smile at the corner of his lips. Words once spoken and deeds once done were like a bullet traveling through time to strike precisely between his brows. Over these 10 years, he had thought more than once that when facing Rachel's feelings for him, there were clearly better ways he could have guided the situation, yet he hadn't. Everything he did was pushing Rachel away from him. Yet when she truly gave up, he realized how deeply his heart could ache. Once, on every night he didn't come home, Rachel would write him long letters, pouring out her longing, dependence, and youthful love. In the following 10 years, he too wrote countless such letters, doing the very things he once scorned, yet not a single one was ever sent. Regretful. They had met so early. After all, they had so much time, so many opportunities. Everything would have made way for their love, had he only been willing, yet he cowardly stepped back. This retreat left no way back for him. After handling Ray's funeral affairs, Rachel was about to return to the experimental base. Ray had two lifelong wishes. One was to develop our country's own anti-aircraft missiles, and the other was to return to his roots in old age. He devoted his entire life to national defense research, spending over 40 years in solitary study deep within the desert. Yet few in the world ever knew his name. He had no family, few friends, and even his funeral was exceptionally quiet and solemn. Military district leaders and national officials arrived in car after car. Everyone seemed familiar with him, yet distant at the same time. Rachel, as his student and the person alive who knew him best, presided over his funeral when everyone had left. She stood alone before the grave, gazing at the aged, wrinkled yet kindly smiling face on the tombstone. She bent down to place a bouquet of flowers before the memorial. Tears glistened in her eyes. Though she forced her tone to sound light, she said, "Teacher, you should rest for a while. When you open your eyes again, you will surely see a stronger motherland standing at the pinnacle of the world. Perhaps we will meet again then." Rachel returned to the research base. But she didn't expect that among those accompanying her this time was Neil. He remained silent throughout the flight, not uttering a single word. Rachel couldn't help but glance at him repeatedly. She wasn't the least bit curious about Neil's purpose for coming, only concerned about her grandfather's health. After all, Ray had just passed away not long ago, making her particularly sensitive to such matters. In her opinion, Neil should stay in City J, where he could look after his grandfather anytime. But after all, this was just her thought. As for what Neil would actually do, it had nothing to do with her. With this thought, Rachel returned her attention to the magazine in her hands. The Red Star V is about to enter the research and development phase. As the chief engineer of this project, she has no time for distractions. The most important thing now is to conserve her energy so she can dive into work as soon as possible. Neil kept stealing subtle glances at Rachel from the corner of his eye. Seeing that she only looked at him a few times without saying anything, he couldn't help but feel a pang of disappointment. He tilted his head slightly, cautiously gazing at her gentle and serene profile. Rachel slightly lowered her head as soft light cascaded down from above, each strand of her hair radiating a gentle halo. She was lost in her own world, unaware of his gaze. A flight attendant passed between them. Neil immediately averted his eyes, his hands resting on his knees, unconsciously tightening their grip on his trousers. Just then, a foreign passenger staggered into the cabin. Rachel, the surrounding passengers immediately became alert. Whether they were reading newspapers or pretending to sleep, they all entered a state of vigilance in an instant. Neil, with extensive special operations experience, he sensed something amiss almost the moment the foreign tourist appeared. As the man drew his pistol and aimed at Rachel, Neil reacted instantly, shielding her with his body. "Rachel, look out!" Thud. Two voices shouted simultaneously as bullets shattered the light above Rachel's head. Screams filled the cabin as several more terrorists appeared instantly. The battle erupted without warning. The special task force engaged in a life-and-death struggle with the terrorists, while Rachel faced the threat of death without showing any panic. Under the protection of the special task force, the terrorists were quickly subdued. Suddenly, Rachel keenly detected a rhythmic beeping sound. A fine layer of sweat broke out across her palms. This was a passenger plane filled with ordinary civilians. The terrorist attack was clearly targeting her. She couldn't let innocent people get caught in the crossfire. She slowly moved behind Neil, just about to tell him there might be a bomb on the plane. Just then, the terrorist flashed a triumphant grin before shouting in broken Chinese, "Bomb on plane, explode soon, you all finished." The cabin instantly plunged into panic again, with screams and sobs erupting simultaneously. The special operations team subdued all the terrorists while flight attendants desperately tried to calm other passengers, urgently evacuating them to positions far from the scene. Rachel quickly checked the ammunition locations. The tension in the cabin reached its peak. Every second feeling unbearably long, faint sobs could be heard around as beads of sweat rolled down Rachel's temples, yet her face showed no trace of fear or panic. Finally, Rachel discovered the timed bomb beneath a seat. Neil crouched half-kneeling opposite her, their breaths so close he could almost hear her heartbeat. "Watch out." Neil uttered a low warning, his eyes locked on the screen readings as sweat trickled down his forehead. 3 minutes left. The words seemed to thicken the air with urgency. Time seemed to freeze, only the relentless ticking echoed through the cabin, a merciless countdown like the approaching footsteps of death. All the passengers held their breath, too tense to even exhale. Rachel's gaze was sharp and profound, her fingers lightly tracing the intricate circuitry, searching for any possible breakthrough. Soon, her gaze darkened slightly, her mind already forming a clear plan. She looked up at Neil and pulled the military knife from his leg. Her voice was soft, yet brooked no argument. "I need you to cut both the red and blue wires with me simultaneously." "Okay." Neil frowned deeply, yet showed no hesitation regarding Rachel's decision. He took the military knife from someone nearby and signaled the others to quickly step back. "On the count of 3, we act together." Rachel's hands were as steady as a rock, her voice calm and firm. 1, 2, 3. The two moved with perfect synchronicity, their actions freezing the very air in that instant. Those brief seconds stretched into eternity. Neil's gaze remained locked on Rachel from the moment he severed the blue wire. He thought, if his life were to end here with Rachel, it would still be heaven's mercy and fortune. At last. 1:47. The flickering numbers paused briefly before resetting to 0. And the alarm abruptly ceased. The cabin fell into complete silence. Only after Rachel completely disarmed the bomb and confirmed the cabin was safe did everyone erupt into cheers of relief at having survived the ordeal. Neil also let out a sigh of relief. He slowly stood up and looked at Rachel, who had remained calm and composed throughout the crisis, his gaze now carrying a trace of both relief and complexity. Rachel was no longer the little girl who would cling to his hand in tears. In places he couldn't see, she had quietly grown into a capable adult who could stand on her own. Now standing before him was not the timid, frightened Rachel who had just arrived at the Owen household at 12 years old, nor was she the love-struck little girl who confessed her feelings to him at 17, and certainly not the cold-eyed young woman who drew clear boundaries with him at 19. Now she is a warrior, a top-tier national weapons research expert. The chief engineer and lead designer of military projects, she quietly grew up, casting aside everything that once confined her. Every past event now seems trivial when placed before her. Compared to her ideals and convictions, both he and the past are insignificant. Rachel had no idea what he was thinking. She merely waved her hand in front of his eyes. "Uncle, are you okay?" Neil suddenly snapped back to reality, looking at the girl before him whose image kept overlapping with his memories, and shook his head. "I'm fine. What about you? Were you scared?" Rachel couldn't help but smile. "Although I've been doing research in the rear, I did graduate from military academy after all. This sort of thing doesn't scare me." Her tone was light, like a gentle breeze that swept away Neil's gloom. He smiled and couldn't help asking, "How did you make that judgment so quickly just now?" Rachel shrugged and laughed. "There's a bomb genius in our dorm, back in school. We often competed to see who could defuse bombs faster or make more unpredictable ones. This bomb is far inferior to her." Meanwhile, deep in the Gobi Desert, Wanda sneezed. "Who's thinking about me?" She sniffled and continued burying herself in her work. Neil gave a wry smile, his words carrying a hint of amusement but mostly respect. "Then your college life must have been quite interesting indeed." A crisis was averted. Passengers gradually returned to their seats. Rachel carefully inspected every cabin of the aircraft once more. After all this commotion, she felt somewhat exhausted. For the latter half of the journey, she spent most of her time resting with her eyes closed. After flying for another hour or so, the plane finally landed and taxied. Public security authorities also dispatched armed police and special forces to hand over the foreign terrorist who attempted to hijack the plane. Rachel also boarded the vehicle sent by the experimental base to meet them. She had originally thought Neil might only be responsible for escorting her until the handover with the experimental base was completed. To think they were actually escorting her all the way back to the research base. Looking at Neil sitting beside her, Rachel felt somewhat surprised, on second thought, with Red Star 1 appearing 10 years earlier than in her previous life. It was only natural that some countries with ulterior motives would take action. The airport was still several hundred kilometers away from the research base. Night fell in the blink of an eye. The deep wilderness occasionally echoed with the howls of wolves. Despite the convoy proceeding with utmost caution, an unexpected incident still occurred. The road ahead was blocked by boulders and tree trunks. The special operations team from the lead vehicle immediately moved forward to inspect. Their flashlight beams cutting through the darkness like luminous pillars, illuminating the obstacles ahead. At this very moment, an unexpected turn of events occurred. A truck, as if out of control, roared toward the convoy with its engine screaming, like a wild beast gone berserk, heedless of consequences. The special operations team reacted almost instantly, but it did nothing to stop the truck. The screech of tires against the pavement was especially piercing in the darkness. It seemed they wanted to take Rachel, but under the protection of the experimental base and the special ops team, they found no opportunity. Neil darkened his gaze and stepped forward to shield Rachel. Sensing the impending danger, he almost instinctively pushed her away. "Rachel, go." Neil, who had been gripping her wrist tightly, Neil had no time to think. His body reacted instinctively, pushing her as far away as possible before leaping up to wrap his arms around her waist. Shielding her beneath him, overturned vehicles exploded one after another, shockwaves and flames instantly devouring everything around them. Rachel, her ears were filled with a deafening buzz. She could hear muffled groans behind her and the sticky warmth slowly spreading across her back. The piercing busy tone amplified her breathing to an unbearable volume. The hand around her waist suddenly loosened, the warm weight collapsing in its wake, staggering to her feet. What blurred into her vision was Neil's blooded back. Uncle, her voice hoarse. Her legs gave way as she knelt beside Neil. She didn't check his wounds immediately, but instead picked up the fallen stick beside him, until a bandit fell in the dust with a thud. Only when she saw a familiar figure running towards her did darkness flood her vision as she collapsed to the ground. The air was thick with the smell of disinfectant. Rachel slowly opened her eyes, and in her dazed state, all she could see was the white ceiling above her. Noticing she was awake, Valerie quickly walked over. "Rachel, how are you feeling?" She still had the same neat short hair as before, only now she was dressed in an Air Force pilot's combat uniform. Valerie ultimately chose the path she wanted to take. Rachel opened her mouth, her voice hoarse beyond recognition. "How is he doing?" Valerie frowned slightly, sitting by the bed and taking her hand, still unconscious, not out of danger yet. The situation was critical. Rachel had no time to avoid the impact. After the car accident, the blunt force trauma wasn't too severe, but she still experienced chest pain and coughed up blood. Upon hearing that Neil remained unconscious, she forced herself to sit up from the hospital bed despite her weakened state. Valerie didn't stop her, merely standing by her side to support her, bearing most of her weight. They walked step by step to the outside of Neil's hospital room. Peering through the glass window at the person inside, tubes inserted and relying on oxygen, the ward was a sterile environment, and visits were not permitted. Rachel stood outside the room, quietly gazing inside for a long while before murmuring softly, "Uncle, you must wake up." With that, she slowly turned away. With Valerie's support, he slowly walked away. She didn't see it. But the moment she turned around, Neil's finger twitched, his body grew heavier and heavier. Neil felt only endless darkness enveloping him, dragging him into deeper despair. He struggled, mustering all his strength to swim upward, but to no avail. Consciousness grew heavier until it was completely stripped away, then suddenly jolted back. The relentless sounds of explosions and sirens filled his ears, a deafening static buzzed through his mind. Thick smoke billowed from the nearby laboratory as shockwaves from the blast rippled outward in layers. The windows of surrounding residential buildings were shattered by the explosion. Police cars and fire trucks formed a long cordon line. Neil stumbled out of the car in a daze. Feeling as though his body and soul existed in different dimensions, he watched himself flash his badge and push past the crowd's attempts to stop him, charging through the police line, eyes bloodshot. Roaring with a hoarse voice, my wife is still inside, let me in." "Wife? What wife?" Neil watched this bizarre dream unfold as a bystander, until he himself pushed aside everyone blocking his way, rushed into the ruins, and moved the stones away piece by piece, shouting hoarsely, Rachel, come out, I can explain, let's live well together. Please come out." His eyes bloodshot, he called out Rachel's name, over and over again, but there was no response. Neil watched everything about him, yet a tearing pain surged from the depths of his soul. He wanted to rush over, he wanted to ask him, what explanation did he owe Rachel? Why was she his wife? Neil noticed the silver ring on his ring finger, a wedding band. He was married to Rachel, yet, in this situation, Neil couldn't muster any joy. He kept digging. The bricks and rubble still carried the residual warmth of the explosion, and the air was thick with the acrid stench of burning. His fingers were mangled and bloody, yet he refused to stop for even a moment. Rachel, Rachel. He knelt on the ground, searching inch by inch. At last, a glint of silver flashed through the mud. He brushed away the soil and saw a hand with a silver ring on its ring finger. He seemed to see a glimmer of hope. His face was alight with a frenzied joy, like a flood bursting through its banks. Rachel, don't be afraid, I'll get you out soon, very soon, just hold on. His voice was hoarse. Trembling uncontrollably, ignoring his bleeding fingers, like a drowning man clutching at straws, the raging waters had shattered his reason. He dug faster, his movements nearly frenzied, yet when he scraped away the final handful of earth, what appeared before his eyes wasn't the figure he had been expecting, but a solitary hand, the same hand that at 12 years old had timidly tugged at his sleeve and shyly called him uncle. The same hand that at 20 had slipped a wedding ring onto his finger, a cold hand, now utterly devoid of warmth. Desperate screams echoed over the ruins, thundering in unison with the lightning. Neil collapsed to his knees, tears mingling with rain, washing away his heart full of regret and resentment. Vision blurred, he held the cold, stiff half-arm in his embrace, his voice filled with grief and bewilderment that he couldn't accept. Why, Rachel, why? His heart was consumed by anguish and regret. Just moments ago, in his last phone call with Rachel, they were still arguing. 1 hour earlier, returning from a business trip out of town, Neil was driving to the hotel while watching the name Rachel repeatedly popping up on his phone. He chose to hang up again and again. I wonder what she saw during her last visit. She's been sending him all sorts of inexplicable texts lately, and the moment she heard his mission was over, she couldn't wait to call, usually holed up in the research institute, not coming back for weeks or even months, only to return and start picking fights and making trouble. Neil was utterly annoyed, his brows furrowed in irritation. Naomi's 2 children were holding a celebration banquet for their academic advancement, and he was rushing to attend. Raising 2 children alone wasn't easy for her. Every time he returned from a mission, he would first visit the mother and her 2 children, offering whatever help he could. After all, they were his fallen comrade's posthumous children. It was only right that he did so. Yet Rachel kept calling repeatedly, asking whether Naomi had anything to do with him, whether the 2 of them were together. This is utterly absurd. All you do all day is be suspicious and paranoid. The phone rang once again. Neil answered impatiently and immediately launched into a barrage of accusations. Rachel, do you find your lab work too easy? How do you have so much free time to let your imagination run wild every day? After a long silence from the other end, Rachel's lifeless voice finally came through. Today was supposed to be Neil's birthday. Rachel, dragging her radiation-ravaged body home, had prepared a table full of his favorite dishes, but he never returned from his mission. Instead, while packing his things, Rachel found a family photo of 4 in his wallet. I saw the photo in your wallet, with Naomi, a family of 4. Those 2 children are yours, aren't they? If you already have someone you love, why did you agree to marry me? You should have told me. Her voice trembled, so fragile it made one's heart clench, yet years of awkward interactions had long made them forget how to speak properly to each other. What nonsense are you talking about? Anything else? If not, I'm hanging up. Neil gripped the steering wheel, his impatience spreading through him, but Rachel unusually didn't comply. Instead, urgently wanting to get to the bottom of things. Tell me, is her child yours? I haven't had a child all these years. Her voice was clearly choked with emotion, but Neil felt as though these words were slapping him in the face. Why did I marry you? Wasn't it you who insisted on marrying me? I really don't know what you're making a fuss about this time. Don't go spreading nonsense everywhere and ruining Naomi's reputation. His emotions grew increasingly intense, until a deafening crash shattered all words. Bang! The communication signal cut off, the phone screen instantly going dark. Neil slammed on the brakes, tires screeching sharply. Looking up, he saw thick plumes of smoke rising from the buildings not far away, the flames dyeing half the sky crimson. An explosion. His heart wrenched violently, as if gripped by an invisible fist. At this moment, all thoughts were swept from his mind, leaving only one impulse. He had to see Rachel, immediately. Right now, alas, he was still one step too late. His body stood like a sculpture amidst ruins, as if a single gust could reduce him to dust. yet also as if he'd weathered centuries of storms and still remained there, unchanging. Ding-ling-ling. The clamor of his phone's ringtone jolted him from his stupor. He mechanically pulled out his phone from his pocket. At this moment, he desperately hoped the caller's name would be Rachel. Unfortunately, it wasn't. The call connected. Naomi's gentle voice came through the receiver. "Come quick, son, your dad's on the phone." Next came the distinctive cracking voice of a boy going through puberty from the other end of the line, with a hint of indignant frustration. "Dad, why aren't you here yet? Today's my promotion celebration banquet. Is that woman stopping you again? I hate her. When are you going to divorce her and come home?" When their comrade sacrificed himself, Naomi's child was already full term. Fearing the child would lack paternal love and grow up without a complete childhood or healthy personality, she pleaded with Neil to pretend to be their father in front of the child. For over a decade, the pretense became reality, and reality turned to pretense. For the first time, he felt disgust toward the child he had doted on. "Shut up, you're not qualified." With that, he hung up the phone. The rescue operation lasted a full day and night, yet the collected limbs and fragments couldn't be pieced together into a complete body. Neil stared blankly, like a puppet that had lost its soul. He never imagined Rachel would leave him in such a manner. Even at the end of their lives, they never got the chance to properly say goodbye. How could there be no regrets? How could there be no sorrow? That was the girl he had loved for a lifetime and hurt for a lifetime. He silently removed the ring from that hand and placed it on his little finger. Hospital room. Neil's monitor suddenly emitted a rapid beeping sound. Doctors and nurses rushed into the room. Rachel was quickly helped out by Valerie, leaning against the wall, but could only wait anxiously outside the ward. The defibrillator rose and fell repeatedly. Neil's body arched upward before crashing back onto the bed. Everyone inside and outside the ward held their breath for him. At last, after the medical staff's relentless efforts, his heartbeat finally returned to normal. The moment he opened his eyes, he turned his head to look out the window, his gaze locked straight onto Rachel, his lips parting to silently mouth the words, "I'm sorry." Rachel's hand gripping the wall suddenly tightened. That single glance carried far too much sorrow. Rachel couldn't understand. After the successful rescue that day, Neil's condition gradually improved day by day. Rachel was discharged early and returned to her job after recovering. By the time Neil could move around, Rachel's figure had long disappeared from the hospital. He limped on a leg injured in a car accident, gazing at the empty hospital room with desolate eyes. After standing there for a long time, he finally returned to his own room. Rachel not coming to see him was something he had anticipated, and he didn't call to disturb Rachel either. Most of his time was spent pondering whether he should see her or not. Rachel remained silent, but Naomi's call came through instead. "Uncle, I heard you got hurt. How are you now? Do you need me to come take care of you?" Neil stood before the shared telephone in the hospital corridor, frowning. "Wait Naomi until she finished speaking before suddenly asking, "Our operations are all classified. How did you know I was injured?" Across from him, Naomi clearly didn't expect this question. She paused briefly before continuing, "Uncle, don't be angry. I was just concerned about you. That's why I asked your comrade." "Which comrade?" Naomi hesitantly uttered a name. Neil nodded. "All right, I understand. Your actions constitute a potential legal violation. This call is being recorded, and I'll report it to the organization as evidence." With that, he hung up the phone without regard for Naomi's pleas and explanations. Neil requested to see Rachel one last time before being discharged from the hospital. This time, Rachel did not refuse. She and Neil sat face to face, silent, like long-lost friends full of nostalgia, yet also like mere acquaintances, polite and distant. After a long silence, it was Neil who finally spoke up to break the quiet. "Rachel, you've changed so much." Rachel gazed at him quietly, her eyes showing a hint of understanding. "So it really is you," a simple sentence. Yet it sent Neil's mind and spirit reeling. His mouth hung open, his gaze trembling. Then, as if suddenly comprehending, he gave a bitter smile and lowered his head. "So that's how it is. So that's why you decided to apply to the National Defense University, to leave City J, leave the Owen household, leave me." Rachel picked up the enamel mug and took a small sip. "We've spent a lifetime testing one wrong dataset. If the parameters remain unchanged, no matter how many experiments we run, they'll still fail. So, we must make a change." Neil lowered his head, eyes brimming with sorrow. With reddened eyes, he gazed at Rachel, his look unmistakably surging with love and reluctance. Choking back tears, he repeated once more those words he'd spoken that day through the hospital room glass. "Rachel, I'm sorry. I should have explained it to you properly that day. Naomi's child isn't mine, it's my comrade's posthumous child. I was just helping take care of them a little more. I neglected your feelings. Rachel set down the enamel mug, its metal rim clinking sharply against the restaurant's glass tabletop. She said, "Uncle, it doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't matter anymore." Compared to Rachel blaming or resenting him, what he feared most was hearing those words, "It doesn't matter anymore." She let go. It meant all the good, the bad, the bitterness or sweet memories, everything was written off and reset to zero with her. Once again, he was a step too late. "Perhaps it's for the best, after all, you've already glimpsed the future of our homeland. We can both contribute more to society's progress." After saying this, Rachel stood up to leave. Before heading out, Neil called out to her, "Will we meet again?" Rachel paused with her hand on the door curtain, thought for a few seconds, then said with certainty, "Yes, we'll meet again." 15 years later, City J, the Great Hall of the People, night fell, and the city lights began to glow. The annual National Defense Science and Technology Contribution Award ceremony slowly commenced. As the gala began, a meticulously produced documentary played on the large screen, showcasing precious historical footage frame by frame. The end of the party, Rachel, Wanda, Susan, and on the large screen behind them, the last recorded footage of Valerie piloting the new fighter jet before crashing into the enemy aircraft in sacrifice. They were all people who carried heavy burdens through the darkness, but some remained in that darkness forever. 20 years had passed since their distant student days. Across the boundaries of time and life and death, they stood together before the light. At the very end, displayed on the large screen was a brief poem in a different font. "Dear girl, may you be resolute. May you be soaring, may you bravely break free from worldly shackles, not bound by clipped wings. May you grow amidst adversity, be your own backbone. May your heart be filled with fire, and your eyes shine with light. Find your way forward even in the darkest night. May you fear not the future nor dwell on the past. Set sail with ideals, facing the tempest of fate. May your life be filled with hope and strength." The end, the end.